The wolf shouldn't have been alive. That's the first thing Arya thought when she found him bleeding out in the snow, his massive body convulsing with each labored breath. His fur was black as midnight, matted with blood so dark it looked like oil against the white ground. And his eyes. God, his eyes were wrong. They glowed amber even as the light faded from them, flickering like dying embers. Everyone in the mountain villages knew about the beast in the northern woods. The rogue wolf that killed without mercy. The monster that even the pack hunters wouldn't track. Mothers used his legend to scare children into obedience. Stay inside after dark, or the shadow wolf will find you. But Arya had never been good at following warnings. She was already damned anyway. Already marked. Already cast out. What was one more sin added to the list of things that made her too dangerous to keep, too valuable to kill? So she knelt in the snow beside the dying wolf everyone feared, and she pressed her bare hands against his torn flesh, and she let the silver fire that lived beneath her skin pour into his wounds. The fire that had gotten her exiled. The fire that made her pack call her cursed. The fire that was about to change everything. Because when those amber eyes snapped open and locked onto hers, Arya realized three things at once. 1, this was no rogue wolf. 2, he recognized her. And 3, she'd just saved the life of the most powerful Alpha King in the Northern Territories. The man who'd once sentenced her to exile without ever learning her name. Before we go deeper, if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, now's the time. Because this story, it's going to take you places you've never been. Hit that subscribe button and buckle in. Trust me, you're going to want to see where this goes. Now, let's rewind. Let's talk about how a girl with cursed fire in her veins ended up alone in the woods with a dying king. Chapter 1. The girl who burned too bright. 3 months earlier, Arya had still believed she might have a future. 3 months earlier, she'd stood in the center of the Crescent Moon Pack's gathering circle, surrounded by wolves who'd known her since she was a child. And she'd tried to prove she wasn't dangerous. She'd failed spectacularly. The burn scars in the sacred oak tree were still smoking when they dragged her away. I didn't mean to, she'd gasped. Even as silver flames licked up her arms. Even as the elders backed away with fear written across their faces. I swear, I was just trying to shift like everyone else. Enough. Alpha Thorn's voice had cut through her, pleading like a blade. He was a hard man, weathered by decades of keeping the pack safe, and he looked at Arya like she was a bomb about to detonate. You are not like everyone else, girl. You never have been. Her mother had been crying. Her father wouldn't meet her eyes. And her sister, her perfect golden-furred sister Maya, had whispered just loud enough for Arya to hear. I told you she was broken. Broken. The word had lodged in Arya's chest like a splinter, sharp and infected. Because maybe Maya was right. Maybe the silver fire that sparked beneath Arya's skin whenever her emotions ran high wasn't a gift. Maybe it was exactly what the pack elders claimed. A corruption. A mutation. A sign that something in her bloodline had gone terribly, dangerously wrong. Normal werewolves shifted into wolves. They felt the moon's pull, and transformed into creatures of fur and fang, powerful and whole. Arya? She barely shifted at all, and when she did, the fire came with her. Silver flames that burned without consuming, that marked everything they touched, that made the other wolves' hackles rise with instinctive fear. You have until sunrise, Alpha Thorn had declared, his voice heavy with something that might have been regret but felt like relief. Take what you can carry. Go north, into the unclaimed territories, and pray to the moon goddess that whatever you are, whatever is inside you, doesn't follow you back to us. Exile. The word tasted like ash in her mouth. Her mother had packed her a bag with shaking hands, dried meat, a water skin, a wool cloak that had belonged to Arya's grandmother. I'm sorry, she'd whispered, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry, baby. If I'd known, when you were born, if I'd seen any sign. It's not your fault, Mom. Arya had tried to keep her voice steady, tried to be brave, but the silver flames were already sparking at her fingertips, responding to the grief that threatened to crack her open. I'm the one who's broken. No, her mother had gripped her shoulders, fierce and desperate. You're not broken, you're just different. And maybe different isn't always bad. Maybe it just means you're meant for something we can't see yet. Pretty words. They hadn't stopped the pack from watching her leave with relief in their eyes. They hadn't stopped Maya from turning her back without a goodbye. And they hadn't stopped Arya from walking into the wilderness alone, 19 years old and utterly certain she was going to die before winter ended. The unclaimed territories were called that for a reason. No pack wanted them. The land was too harsh, too wild, too close to the ancient forests where things older than wolves still lingered. The humans avoided the region entirely, spinning tales of ghosts and monsters to explain why their hunters never returned. Arya learned quickly that the stories weren't entirely wrong. There were things in those woods, things that watched her from the shadows with eyes that glowed colors that shouldn't exist. Things that howled at frequencies that made her bones ache and her silver fire rise to the surface of her skin in self-defense. But the things in the woods never attacked her. It was almost as if they recognized something in her. Something that made them pause, assess, and then retreat. Arya tried not to think too hard about what that meant. She found an abandoned trapper's cabin on her second week of exile, half-collapsed roof, walls thick with moss. But it had a stone fireplace that still worked, and a door that could be barred from the inside. It became her sanctuary, her prison, her home. She taught herself to hunt, badly at first, then with increasing skill as hunger became a better motivator than pride. Rabbits, mostly, sometimes a deer if she was lucky and patient. She taught herself to control the fire. Or at least, to live with it. On the coldest nights, she'd let the silver flames dance across her skin, marveling at how they warmed her without burning, how they responded to her emotions like a second heartbeat, and she taught herself to be alone. That was the hardest lesson. Wolves weren't meant for solitude. They were pack creatures, social animals who thrived on connection and hierarchy and belonging. Being cut off from the pack bond felt like losing a limb. Arya would wake in the middle of the night, gasping, reaching for a connection that wasn't there anymore. Sometimes she wondered if the isolation would kill her before the wilderness did. But then winter had come in earnest, brutal and unforgiving, and Arya had been too busy surviving to worry about loneliness. Until the night she heard the howling. It started 3 days before she found him. A sound that cut through the frozen air like a knife, raw, agonized, furious. Not the normal howl of a wolf calling to its pack. This was the sound of something being hunted. Something fighting back. Arya had barred her door and tried to ignore it. But the howling continued. Night after night, growing weaker each time, moving closer to her territory. On the third night, it stopped altogether. And that silence was somehow worse than the screaming had been. Arya told herself it wasn't her problem. Whatever was out there, whatever was dying in the woods, it had nothing to do with her. She was exiled. Alone. The last thing she needed was to get involved in someone else's nightmare. But her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory, soft and sad. The gift of healing is also a curse, little flame, because once you know someone is suffering, you can't unknow it. And if you have the power to help and choose not to, that choice will haunt you forever. Her grandmother had been a healer, one of the best the Crescent Moon Pack had ever known. She'd also been the only one who hadn't looked at Arya's silver fire with fear. She'd looked at it with recognition. You have her eyes, her mother had said once, when Arya was small. My mother's eyes. I'd hoped, I'd prayed you wouldn't inherit anything else. Arya hadn't understood then. She understood now. So when dawn broke on the fourth day, Arya strapped on her grandmother's hunting knife, wrapped herself in her warmest furs, and went looking for the source of the howling. She found the blood trail first. Dark spatters against white snow, leading deeper into the forest. Too much blood. Whatever had left this trail should have been dead already. Arya followed it anyway. The forest grew darker as she walked, the trees pressing closer together, their branches forming a canopy so thick that barely any light filtered through. The air felt wrong here, charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. And then she saw him. The wolf lay in a small clearing, his body partially hidden beneath a fallen tree. Massive, easily twice the size of any wolf Arya had ever seen. His fur was pure black, unmarked except for the blood that soaked it. And he was shaking, his entire body racked with tremors that spoke of fever and infection and approaching death. Arya's breath caught. She should have run, should have turned around and pretended she'd never seen this. Because even dying, this wolf radiated power. danger, the kind of predator that sat at the very top of the food chain. This was the shadow wolf. Had to be. The monster from the stories. But when Arya took a step closer, drawn by an instinct she couldn't name, the wolf's eyes opened. Amber. Bright as sunrise. Intelligent. And fixed on her with an intensity that froze her in place. "Hey," Arya whispered, her voice rough from disuse. "It's okay, I'm not going to hurt you." The wolf's lips pulled back, revealing teeth that could tear her apart. But the growl that rumbled from his chest was weak, fading. He was dying. Right here in front of her. This magnificent, terrifying creature was bleeding out in the snow. And Arya was probably the only living soul for miles who could do anything about it. Her grandmother's voice again. "If you have the power to help and choose not to." "Damn it," Arya breathed. She knelt beside the wolf, ignoring every survival instinct screaming at her to run. Up close, she could see the extent of his injuries, deep gashes across his ribs, a nasty wound on his hind leg, and something worse. Something that made her silver fire rise instinctively to the surface of her skin. Poison. She could smell it in his blood, acrid and wrong. Someone hadn't just tried to kill this wolf. They'd tried to make sure he stayed dead. "This is going to hurt," Arya warned, though she doubted he could understand her. "And you're probably going to try to bite me. But if you want to live, you need to trust me. Just for a minute." "Can you do that?" The amber eyes narrowed, assessed her. And then impossibly, the wolf went still, stopped fighting, like he'd made a decision, like he was choosing to trust her. Arya didn't let herself think about how strange that was. She pressed her hands against his largest wound and let go of the iron control she'd maintained over her fire for 3 months. Silver flames erupted from her palms, pouring into the wolf's body, not burning, healing. Seeking out the poison, the infection, the torn flesh and shattered bone, Arya felt her power surge through him like a river finding its course, hot and bright and terrifyingly strong. The wolf's body went rigid. A howl tore from his throat, pain and shock and something else. Something that sounded almost like recognition. Arya held on, even as her own strength began to waver. Even as the silver fire demanded more and more of her. She'd never healed anything this big before, never pushed her power this far. But she couldn't stop now. If she stopped, he'd die. And for reasons she couldn't explain, that was unacceptable. "Come on," she gasped, sweat freezing on her face despite the heat pouring from her hands. "Come on, damn you. Fight. Live." The wolf's eyes locked onto hers. And Arya swore she saw something flicker in those amber depths. Something human. Something that knew exactly what she was doing. The healing fire surged one last time, white-hot and absolute. Arya felt the poison break apart, felt the wounds knit together, felt life flood back into the massive body beneath her hands. And then the fire consumed everything she had left, and the world went dark. When Arya woke, she was staring up at an unfamiliar ceiling. No, not a ceiling. Canvas. A tent. She bolted upright, her heart hammering, silver fire already sparking at her fingertips in self-defense. Where was she? How had she gotten here? The last thing she remembered was the wolf. Arya spun around, searching for the massive black wolf she'd healed, and found something that made her blood run cold. A man. He sat in the corner of the tent, perfectly still, watching her with eyes that glowed amber even in the dim light. He was beautiful in the way dangerous things are beautiful, all sharp edges and controlled power. Dark hair that fell past his shoulders, features that could have been carved from stone, and a body that radiated strength even at rest. He wore simple black clothing that looked expensive, and there were silver rings on his fingers that marked him as someone important, someone powerful, someone Arya had definitely seen before. Her mind flashed back to a year ago. The annual gathering of the Northern Packs. The ceremony where the Alpha King himself had presided over territorial disputes, his presence so commanding that even the strongest alphas had bowed their heads in deference. Arya had been nobody then. Just another young wolf in the crowd, trying to stay invisible while her silver fire sparked nervously beneath her skin. But she'd seen him. Everyone had. The Alpha King Kael Stormborn, ruler of the Northern Territories, legend made flesh. The man who'd sentenced 3 wolves to exile that day for daring to challenge his authority. The man who now sat 3 feet away from her, alive and whole and utterly terrifying. You, Arya whispered, her voice cracking. You're alive, Cale Stormborn finished, his voice like dark honey. Thanks to you. He stood, and Arya's instincts screamed at her to run. But she was trapped between him and the tent wall. And besides, her legs felt like water. The healing had taken too much out of her. Cale crossed the space between them in 2 strides. He moved like a predator, graceful and deadly. And when he crouched down to her level, Arya stopped breathing. What's your name? He asked. Arya's mind raced. Should she lie? Would he recognize her from the gathering? Would he remember sentencing her Pax petition for? I can hear your heartbeat, Cale said, amusement flickering across his features. You're terrified. But you weren't afraid when you knelt beside a dying wolf in the snow. Why is that? The wolf couldn't ask me questions. Arya shot back before she could stop herself. Cale's lips curved into something that might have been a smile. True. He tilted his head, studying her with an intensity that made her feel like he could see straight through her skin. You have silver fire in your veins. I felt it when you healed me. That's rare. I'm aware. And you're alone out here. Exiled, I'm guessing, since no wolf would choose to live in the unclaimed territories unless they had no other choice. Arya's jaw tightened. Is there a point to this interrogation? Yes. Cale reached out, and before Arya could flinch away, he caught her hand. His thumb brushed across her palm, right over the spot where her silver fire burned hottest. I'm trying to figure out why the moon goddess would send a cursed, exiled little wolf to save the life of a king. I'm not cursed, Arya snapped, even though she'd said the exact same thing about herself 100 times. And I didn't save you for any grand reason. You were dying. I could help, so I did. Just like that? Just like that. Cale stared at her for a long moment. Then he laughed, a short, sharp sound that held no humor. Do you know how many wolves would have let me die? How many would have celebrated finding the great Alpha King bleeding out in the snow? Arya pulled her hand from his grip. Sounds like you have some enemies. More than I can count. Cale's expression darkened. The poison in my blood wasn't an accident. Someone on my own council tried to have me assassinated 3 days ago. They hired a pack of rogues to hunt me down, made sure I couldn't heal, and left me to die slowly. Horror crawled up Arya's spine. Your own council? Power makes people do terrible things. Cale stood, his presence filling the tent. But what's done is done. I survived. And now I need to repay the debt I owe. You don't owe me anything, Arya said quickly. The last thing she needed was to be in debt to the most powerful alpha in the north. I helped because I could. That's it. We're even. No, Cale said softly, his amber eyes burning into hers. We're not. He moved to the tent entrance, then paused. When he looked back at her, there was something in his expression that made Arya's breath catch. Something possessive. Something that felt like destiny wrapping chains around her future. What's your name? He asked again. This time, Arya couldn't find a reason not to answer. Arya, she whispered. Arya Ashbourne. Kyle's eyes widened, just slightly. Like he recognized the surname. Like it meant something. Ashbourne, he repeated, tasting the name. The bloodline that was supposed to be extinct. Arya's heart stopped. I don't know what you're talking about. But the lie was transparent, and they both knew it. Kyle smiled, then a real smile, sharp and dangerous and hungry. Yes, you do. And that, Arya Ashbourne, changes everything. He left the tent before she could respond, his voice drifting back to her. Rest, heal. And when you're strong enough, we're going to have a very interesting conversation about who you really are. Arya sat frozen, her mind spinning, her silver fire crackling beneath her skin in response to the fear and confusion. And something else, something that felt dangerously like hope. She'd saved the Alpha King. And somehow, in doing so, she'd just set something in motion that she couldn't take back. The girl who'd been exiled for being too dangerous had just caught the attention of the most dangerous wolf alive. Gods help her. This was only the beginning. Chapter 2. When darkness wears a crown. Arya didn't sleep. How could she, when every time she closed her eyes, she saw those amber eyes staring at her like she was a puzzle he intended to solve? When her mind kept circling back to that one word Ashbourne, and the way Cale had said it like he was unearthing a grave, she lay on the bedroll someone had provided, wrapped in furs that smelled like pine and smoke and something distinctly male, and tried to make sense of what had just happened to her carefully constructed exile. The tent was warm despite the winter cold outside. Too warm. There had to be a heating source she couldn't see, some kind of magic woven into the fabric itself, which meant this wasn't just any camp. This was wealth, power, the kind of resources only someone like an alpha king could command. Outside she could hear voices, low, urgent conversations that stopped whenever footsteps passed too close to her tent. Guards, probably. Watching her, making sure she didn't run, or making sure no one got to her. The thought sent a chill down her spine that had nothing to do with temperature. Arya sat up slowly, testing her strength. The healing had drained her more than she'd expected, but she wasn't completely useless. Her silver fire hummed beneath her skin, restless and reactive. It always got like this when she was stressed, like a second heartbeat that pulsed in time with her anxiety. She needed to leave. That much was clear. Whatever Cale Stormborn wanted with her, whatever he thought he knew about her bloodline, it couldn't be good. Men like him didn't do anything without a reason, without an angle. And Arya had spent her entire life being used by people who saw her as a tool, a weapon, a problem to be managed. She wasn't about to add an alpha king to that list. Arya stood, her legs still shaky but functional, and crept toward the tent entrance. She could make it to the tree line if she was fast enough. Once she was in the forest, she knew how to disappear. How to? I wouldn't. Arya spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. Cale stood in the shadows at the back of the tent, so still she hadn't even noticed him. How long had he been there? How had she not sensed him? Wouldn't what? Arya asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Run. Cale stepped into the dim light, and Arya's breath caught despite herself. He'd changed clothes, still all black, but now he wore a thick winter coat lined with fur, and there were weapons strapped to his body. Knives at his hips, a sword across his back. He looked every inch the warrior king he was supposed to be. You wouldn't make it 300 yards before my guards caught you, and then I'd have to explain why I'm harboring a runaway exile, which would raise questions I'm not prepared to answer yet. I'm not your prisoner, Arya said, even though the evidence suggested otherwise. No, Cale agreed, moving closer with that predatory grace that made every instinct in her body scream danger. You're not. You're my guest. There's a difference. Guests are usually allowed to leave. Guests are usually safe. Cale stopped a few feet away, his amber eyes locked on hers. You saved my life, Arya. Which means anyone who wants me dead now has a very good reason to want you dead too. So yes, you're staying here where I can protect you, at least until I figure out what to do with you. The words sent a spike of anger through Arya's chest. I don't need your protection. I've survived 3 months alone in these woods without anyone's help. Against rabbits and deer, maybe. Cale's expression darkened. But the wolves who poisoned me? The ones who hunted me through these forests for 3 days? They're trained assassins, Arya. And they're still out there. Still looking for any sign I survived. Arya's stomach dropped. You think they'll come here? I know they will. Cale's jaw tightened. I left a trail. Not obvious. But enough. I want them to find me. I want them to think I'm still weak, still vulnerable. His eyes glittered with something cold and furious. And when they come, I'm going to find out exactly who on my council decided I was expendable. That's suicide, Arya breathed. That's justice. Cale tilted his head, studying her. But you're right that it's dangerous, which is why you're going to stay in this tent, behind my guards, where nothing can touch you. Because you owe me a debt, Arya said flatly. Because you're valuable. The words came out low, intense. Cale took another step closer, and Arya's back hit the tent wall. She was trapped between canvas and the most powerful predator in the Northern Territories, and her silver fire was already rising to the surface in response. That fire in your veins? The way it burned through poison that should have killed me in hours. I've never seen anything like it. Never felt anything like it. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she couldn't, his fingers brushed against her wrist, right over her pulse point. Arya gasped as silver flames erupted across her skin, crawling up her arm in response to his touch. But Cale didn't flinch, didn't pull away. Instead, his eyes widened with something that looked like wonder. "You see?" he murmured. "Magnificent." "Stop," Arya whispered, but her voice had no strength. The fire was responding to him in a way it never had to anyone else. Dancing, reaching, like it recognized him on some fundamental level. Like it wanted him. "Tell me about the Ashbourne bloodline," Cale said, his voice dropping to something intimate. "Dangerous. Tell me why your family was supposed to be dead." "I don't know what you're talking about," Arya lied, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. "Yes, you do." Cale's thumb traced a circle on her wrist, right where the silver flames burned brightest. "Your grandmother was a healer. One of the most powerful the Northern Territories ever produced. She could cure anything, poison, curse, death itself if she caught it early enough. And she had fire in her veins, just like you." Arya's breath came short and sharp. How did he know that? How could he possibly? "She died 30 years ago," Cale continued, his eyes never leaving hers. "Burned herself out saving an entire pack from a plague that should have wiped them off the map. And when she died, everyone assumed the Ashbourne gift died with her. That there were no heirs. No one left to carry that particular power forward." "Maybe they were right," Arya said, her voice barely audible. "Except here you are." Cale's smile was sharp. "Knowing. Exiled by your own pack, because they were terrified of what you could do. Cast out into the wilderness to die. And instead, you saved a king." "I didn't know you were a king when I saved you," Arya shot back. "I just saw something dying and decided to help. That's all." "Is it?" Cale leaned in, close enough that Arya could feel the heat radiating from his body, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his amber eyes. "Because I think the moon goddess has a sense of humor. I think she put you in my path for a reason, and I think you feel it too." He was right, and that terrified her. Because the moment Arya had touched him, the moment her fire had poured into his body, she'd felt something shift, like a lock turning, like a door opening to something vast and inevitable. She'd felt seen in a way she'd never experienced before, and that was more dangerous than any assassin. "I don't believe in destiny," Arya whispered. "Neither did I." Cale's hand moved from her wrist to her jaw, tilting her face up to meet his gaze. "But I believe in survival. I believe in power. And I believe that you and I are going to be very useful to each other, Arya Ashbourne. I'm not a weapon you can wield." "No." Cale agreed, his voice soft and deadly serious. "You're much more than that. You're a healer who can burn through poison that even my court mages couldn't touch. You're a wolf with silver fire that responds to my presence like it's coming home. And you're the last living heir to a bloodline everyone thought was extinct." His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, and Arya hated how her body leaned into the touch. "Which means you're either the answer to a prayer I didn't know I was praying, or you're the beginning of something that's going to tear my world apart." "And if I'm the second one?" Arya asked, her silver fire crackling between them. Cale's smile was all teeth. "Then we burn together." A howl split the night. Cale's head snapped toward the sound, every muscle in his body going tense. The hand on Arya's face dropped to the knife at his hip in one fluid motion. "Stay here," he commanded, already moving toward the tent entrance. "Like hell." Arya shot back, following him. Cale whirled on her, his eyes flashing alpha bright. "Arya, if your assassins are here, you're going to need all the help you can get." She met his gaze without flinching, even though every instinct told her to bare her throat in submission. "And I'm guessing I'm one of the few people in this camp who can heal you if things go wrong." Again, Cale stared at her for a long moment. Then he laughed short, sharp, and genuinely surprised. "You're either very brave or very stupid. Both. Probably." "Fine." Cale grabbed a second knife from somewhere and pressed it into her hand. "But you stay behind me, and if I tell you to run, you run. Understood?" Arya nodded, even though they both knew she was lying. They burst out of the tent together into chaos. The camp was small, maybe a dozen tents arranged in a defensive circle, with guards posted at intervals. But half those guards were already down, their bodies crumpled in the snow, and the rest were fighting for their lives against wolves that moved like shadows. 5 of them, No 6. All massive, all moving with the coordinated precision of trained killers. And in the center of it all, a woman stood watching the carnage with cold satisfaction. She was beautiful in an Ice Queen sort of way, pale blonde hair, sharp features, dressed in white furs that made her almost invisible against the snow. But her eyes were pure malice. And when she saw Kale emerge from the tent, her smile was poisonous. "Hello, husband," she purred. Arya's stomach dropped. "Husband?" Kale's entire body went rigid. "Seraphine, did you really think I wouldn't find you?" Seraphine asked, her voice carrying across the clearing like a blade. "Did you really think you could survive my poison and just disappear?" "I should have known," Kale said, his voice gone cold and deadly. "Only you would be arrogant enough to try to kill me yourself." "Arrogant?" Seraphine laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "No, darling. Strategic. You were getting too close to the truth, too close to figuring out what we've been planning. So I did what needed to be done. I removed the obstacle." "We?" Kale's hand tightened on his sword. "Who else is involved, Seraphine? How deep does this betrayal go? Deep enough that by the time I'm done, there won't be a Stormborn king on the northern throne." Seraphine's eyes flicked to Arya, and her expression twisted into something ugly. "Although I have to admit, I'm curious. Who's the little bitch you've been hiding in your tent? Did you really replace me that quickly?" Arya felt Kyle tense beside her, felt the rage rolling off him in waves. "She's none of your concern," Kale said softly, dangerously. "Oh, but she is." Seraphine's smile widened. "Because if she matters to you, then she's leverage, which means she dies. Nothing personal, sweetheart." She made a gesture, and the shadow wolves turned as one toward Arya. Everything happened at once. Kale moved to intercept, his sword singing as it left its sheath. The remaining guards rallied, throwing themselves between the assassins and their king. And Arya stopped thinking and let her instincts take over. Silver fire exploded from her body in a wave that lit up the entire clearing like a second sun. It poured from her hands, her arms, her very skin, and it didn't burn, it protected. A wall of flame that the shadow wolves couldn't cross, that sent them skittering backward with yelps of pain and confusion. "Impossible," Seraphine breathed, her face going pale. "That fire, that's Ashborn flame." Kale finished, his voice filled with dark satisfaction. He stood beside Arya, his sword dripping with blood, and when he looked at her, there was something fierce and possessive in his eyes. "Still think she's just leverage?" Seraphine's expression contorted with rage. Kill them both." The shadow wolves attacked again, but they were hesitant now. Afraid. Arya's fire had hurt them in a way normal flames couldn't, had touched something deep in their wolf souls and made them remember what it felt like to be prey. Kale used that hesitation ruthlessly. He moved like death itself, his sword finding throats and hearts with surgical precision. But he never strayed far from Arya, never left her unprotected. And every time one of the assassins got too close, her silver fire lashed out, driving them back, burning without consuming. They fought like that back to back, moving in sync despite never having trained together, like they'd been doing this for years, like their bodies knew each other's rhythms without needing to be taught. It should have been impossible. It felt like destiny. Within minutes, 4 of the shadow wolves were dead. The 5th was badly wounded, limping back toward Seraphine with its tail between its legs. And the sixth was running, disappearing into the trees like a coward. Seraphine's face was a mask of fury and disbelief. "This isn't over," she snarled, already backing toward her own escape route. "You think one little fire witch is going to save you? You think she's going to stop what's coming? I think you should run," Kale said softly, his sword pointed at her heart. "While you still can." Seraphine's eyes narrowed. Then she turned and fled, her white furs vanishing into the darkness. Kale didn't follow. For a long moment, the clearing was silent, except for the sound of labored breathing and the crackle of Arya's dying flames. Then Kale turned to her, his eyes blazing with something that stole the air from her lungs. "You," he said slowly, deliberately, "are extraordinary." Arya's knees buckled. The adrenaline was wearing off, and with it came the crushing exhaustion of using that much power that quickly. She'd never released her fire like that before, never let it explode outward in a protective wave. She hadn't even known she could. Cale caught her before she hit the ground, his arms wrapping around her waist, pulling her against his chest. "I've got you," he murmured into her hair. "I've got you." Arya wanted to push him away, wanted to maintain her independence, her distance, her careful walls. But she was so tired, and he was so warm, and for the first time in 3 months, she didn't feel alone. So she let herself lean into him, just for a moment. Just until the world stopped spinning. "Your wife tried to kill you," she mumbled against his chest. "Ex-wife," Cale corrected, his voice vibrating through her. "The marriage was political, and it's been over for 2 years. I just haven't had time to make it official." "She seems angry about that." "She's angry I wouldn't give her power." Cale's arms tightened around her. She wanted to be queen, wanted access to the throne, the territory, the councils. But I saw through her. Saw what she really was beneath the pretty face. His hand came up to cradle the back of Arya's head, gentle despite the violence he'd just unleashed. "I should have killed her when I had the chance. Before she could gather allies. Before she could try to take everything I've built. Why didn't you?" Arya asked. Cale was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Because I'm not a monster, Arya. Despite what the legends say." Arya pulled back just enough to look up at him, to see the exhaustion and pain written across his features. This close, she could see the scars that decorated his skin, old wounds that told stories of battles won and lost. Could see the weight he carried in the set of his shoulders. He wasn't just a king. He was a man who'd been fighting his entire life. Fighting to survive. Fighting to protect what was his. Fighting alone, just like her. "She's going to come back," Arya said quietly. "I know." Cale's jaw tightened. "With more assassins. More poison. More schemes. She won't stop until one of us is dead." "Then what are you going to do?" Cale looked down at her, and something in his expression shifted. Softened. "I'm going to fight back. I'm going to find every traitor on my council. I'm going to reclaim my throne." His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "And you're going to help me?" "Why would I do that?" Arya whispered, even though she already knew the answer. "Because you're tired of hiding." Cale's voice dropped to something intimate, magnetic. "Because you're tired of being told you're too dangerous, too powerful. Too much. Because somewhere deep down, you want what I want. And what's that? To burn the world down and build something better in the ashes." Cale's smile was sharp and dangerous and beautiful. "To stop running. To stop apologizing for existing. To claim the power that's always been yours and make everyone who ever underestimated you regret it." Arya's breath caught. Because he was right. Gods help her, he was absolutely right. She was tired of hiding. Tired of being afraid. Tired of pretending her fire was something to be ashamed of, instead of celebrated. And this man, this dangerous, complicated, infuriating king saw her. Really saw her. Not as a problem or a weapon, but as something valuable, as someone who deserved to take up space in the world. "If I agree to help you," Arya said slowly, "what do I get out of it?" Cale's eyes glittered with triumph. "Everything. Protection, purpose. A place where your power is an asset instead of a curse." He leaned in, close enough that she could feel his breath against her lips. "And when this is over, when I've reclaimed my throne and destroyed everyone who dared to betray me, I'll give you a choice. Stay or go. But either way, you'll never have to hide again." It was a good offer. More than good. It was everything Arya had been too afraid to hope for. But there was a catch. There was always a catch. "What aren't you telling me?" she asked. Cale's smile turned rueful. "You're perceptive." He pulled back slightly, his expression growing serious. "The Ashbourne bloodline isn't just powerful, Arya. It's legendary. Your grandmother didn't just heal people, she could sense corruption. Could burn through curses, poisons, dark magic. She was one of the few wolves who could identify traitors just by touching them." Understanding crashed over Arya like a wave. "You want me to find out who else on your council is working with Seraphine? I need you to." Kale's voice was steady, but his eyes held desperation. Because I can't trust anyone else. My guards could be compromised, my advisors could be bought, my friends could be enemies. His hand tightened on her waist. But you? You have no loyalty to anyone in my court. No reason to lie to me. And if your power works the way I think it does, you'll be able to tell me exactly who I can trust. And if I can't? Arya challenged. If my fire doesn't work that way? If I'm just a healer, and nothing more? Then I'm already dead, Kale said simply. And so is everyone who depends on me. My pack, my territory, thousands of wolves who look to the Stormborn line for protection. The weight of it pressed down on Arya's shoulders like a physical thing. He was asking her to save not just him, but an entire kingdom. To step out of exile and into the heart of political intrigue and assassination plots. To stop hiding and start fighting. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was insane. That she should run right now, disappear into the wilderness, forget she'd ever met the Alpha King. But the silver fire in her veins hummed with something that felt like recognition, like purpose. And when she looked up at Kale, really looked at him, she saw someone who understood what it meant to carry power that others feared. Someone who knew what it cost to stand alone. Someone who was offering her a chance to be more than a curse. One condition, Arya said finally. Kale's eyebrows rose. Name it. If I do this, if I help you root out traitors and save your kingdom, you help me find out the truth about my bloodline, about why my grandmother really died, about what the Ashborn power actually is. Arya held his gaze, refusing to back down. Because I'm tired of not knowing why I am the way I am. Tired of being afraid of my own fire. And if I'm going to risk my life for you, I want answers. Kale stared at her for a long moment. Then he smiled a real smile. Warm and genuine and devastating. Deal, he said, and he held out his hand, formal and binding. Arya took it, and silver fire sparked where their skin touched. Not painful, not dangerous, just right. Like two pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. Welcome to the pack, Arya Ashborn, Kale murmured, his voice low and intimate. Try not to die before I figure out what to do with you. Same to you, Your Majesty. Arya shot back. And despite everything, despite the danger, the uncertainty, the absolute insanity of what she'd just agreed to, Arya felt something uncurl in her chest that she hadn't felt in months. Hope. Dangerous. Foolish. Absolutely reckless hope. But hope nonetheless. The girl who'd been exiled for her fire had just made a deal with a king. And the world was about to learn what happened when two dangerous souls decided to stop running and start burning. Chapter 3. Scars that shape us. Arya couldn't sleep after the attack. They'd moved Camp Kale's orders. Too dangerous to stay where Seraphine knew they were, even with half her assassins dead in the snow. So they'd packed up in the dark, the surviving guards moving with military efficiency, and traveled 3 hours north to a cave system that Kale claimed was secure. My father used to bring me here, he'd explained as they climbed through narrow passages lit only by torchlight. When he wanted to teach me how to survive on my own, how to think like prey instead of predator. No one knows about these caves except the Stormborn line. And you trust me with that information? Arya had asked. Kale had looked back at her, his amber eyes glowing in the darkness. I trust you more than I trust most of my council, which should probably concern both of us. Now, hours later, Arya sat near the mouth of the cave system, watching dawn break over the frozen forest below. The cave was warmer than it had any right to be. Geothermal springs ran beneath the stone, Kale had said, heating the entire network. But Arya couldn't shake the chill that had settled into her bones. She kept seeing Seraphine's face. That cold, beautiful mask of hatred. Kill them both. Arya had killed before animals, for food. It was survival. But tonight she'd fought wolves. Sentient, thinking beings who'd been trying to murder her. And her fire had responded with a viciousness she hadn't known she possessed. She looked down at her hands, half expecting to see blood. But they were clean. Just pale skin and the faint silver tracery of veins that glowed when her power rose close to the surface. Can't sleep? Arya jumped, silver flames sparking instinctively at her fingertips before she recognized Kale's voice. He stood a few feet away, dressed in simple sleeping clothes, loose pants and a shirt that hung open at the collar. His hair was loose around his shoulders, and without all the leather and weapons, he looked younger. more human. Still dangerous, though. That never went away. Didn't mean to startle you, Kale said, moving to sit beside her on the stone ledge, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Though I have to admit, watching your fire respond that quickly is impressive. Most wolves take years to develop those kinds of defensive reflexes. Most wolves can control when they shift, Arya said quietly. I barely can. The fire does what it wants. Does it? Kale tilted his head, studying her profile. Or does it do exactly what you need it to do, and you just don't trust it yet? Arya pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. You don't understand. I've hurt people with this. My own pack, my family. Tell me, Kale said softly, and maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the way he'd fought beside her without hesitation. Maybe it was just that she was tired of carrying the weight alone. But Arya found herself talking. I was 7 the first time it happened, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. We were doing this pack exercise, all the young wolves learning to shift together. It's supposed to be this beautiful communal thing, you know? Everyone changes under the full moon, howling together, becoming part of something bigger. She closed her eyes, remembering. I wanted it so badly. Wanted to feel what everyone else felt. To belong. So when the moon rose, and I felt that pull, I reached for it with everything I had. What happened? Kale asked, his voice careful, gentle. The fire came instead. Arya's hands trembled, and silver flames flickered across her knuckles. I didn't shift into a wolf. I shifted into something else. Something that burned. The other children started screaming. The adults tried to contain me, but the fire just kept growing. It took 3 of our strongest wolves to knock me unconscious, and when I woke up, she swallowed hard against the lump in her throat. The sacred grove where we'd been practicing was charred black. 2 of the elders had burns that took weeks to heal, and everyone looked at me like I was a monster. Kale was quiet for a moment. Then, you were 7 years old and experiencing a power you didn't understand. Of course you couldn't control it. That's what my mother said. Arya's laugh was bitter. She kept insisting it was just a phase. That I'd grow out of it. Learn to control it. But it kept happening. Every time I tried to shift, the fire came. Every time my emotions ran high, the flames sparked. I was a walking hazard. So they exiled you. Not right away. Arya rested her chin on her knees, staring out at the sunrise. They tried to train me first. Brought in specialists from other packs. Mages who studied bloodline magic, but nothing worked. The fire was too wild, too unpredictable. And then, 3 months ago, her voice cracked, and Kale shifted closer, not touching but present, solid. I was at the coming-of-age ceremony, Arya continued. My sister Maya was being recognized as an adult member of the pack. Everyone was celebrating, and I was so happy for her, you know? So proud. But also, she closed her eyes, also jealous. Because Maya was perfect, beautiful, strong. Her shift was flawless. Everything I wasn't. Arya, I didn't mean to let it show, she said quickly. I was trying so hard to just smile and be supportive. But my father made this speech about how proud he was of Maya, how she embodied everything a wolf should be, and I felt the fire start to rise. I tried to push it down, tried to control it, but the memory crashed over her like a wave. The silver flames erupting from her body. Her father's face, shocked and afraid. The sacred oak tree catching fire, its ancient bark smoking and charring. Maya screaming at her, "You're ruining everything. You can't even let me have one night without making it about you." And the worst part, the absolute worst part, was that Maya had been right. I destroyed the ceremony, Arya whispered. Scarred the sacred tree. Made everyone remember that I was the cursed one. The broken one. Alphathorn gave me until sunrise to leave, and no one argued with him, not even my parents. She felt tears burning behind her eyes but refused to let them fall. She'd cried enough over her exile, over being unwanted, over being too much and not enough all at once. Kale was silent for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He took her hand. Arya's first instinct was to pull away, but his grip was gentle, steady, and when she looked down, she saw silver fire dancing across both their palms where they touched, not burning, just existing. Beautiful and strange and somehow right. "You want to know what I see when I look at you?" Cale asked quietly. Arya shook her head, not trusting her voice. "I see someone who survived being cast out by everyone who was supposed to love her," Cale said. "Someone who lived alone in hostile territory for 3 months and didn't break. Someone who found a dying stranger and decided to save him even though it would have been easier, safer to let him die." His thumb brushed across her knuckles, making the silver flames flare brighter. "I see someone powerful enough to terrify an entire pack. And someone brave enough to keep trying to control that power even after everyone gave up on her." "I'm not brave," Arya whispered. "I'm just stubborn. Too stupid to know when to quit." "Same thing usually." Cale's smile was soft, almost tender. "My father used to say that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's being absolutely terrified and doing the thing anyway." Arya finally looked at him. Really looked at him. In the growing dawn light, she could see the exhaustion written across his features, the weight he carried, the scars that decorated his skin. "You're afraid," she said, surprised by the realization. "Right now. You're terrified." "Constantly," Cale admitted. "I'm afraid Seraphine will win. Afraid I won't figure out who the traitors are before they strike again. Afraid that everything I've built will crumble because I trusted the wrong person." His eyes locked onto hers. "But I'm more afraid of what happens if I do nothing. If I let fear paralyze me into inaction. So you keep fighting." "So I keep fighting." Cale's hand tightened on hers. "And now you're going to fight with me. Which means I need to know everything, Arya. About your power. About your family. About why your grandmother was so important that people still remember her name 30 years after her death." Arya took a shaky breath. "I don't know much. My mother didn't talk about her. Neither did my father. It was like they wanted to forget she'd ever existed." "Why?" "I think they were afraid," Arya said slowly, working through thoughts she'd never put into words before. "Afraid I'd inherited too much of her. That I'd end up like she did, burned out and dead before my time." "How did she die?" Cale asked. "The official story is that she exhausted herself healing a plague, but there's always more to it, isn't there?" Arya nodded slowly. "There was a sickness. 20 years before I was born. It swept through the northern territories, killing wolves faster than anyone could contain it. The packs were desperate, dying. And my grandmother, she tried to save them." She closed her eyes, remembering the stories her mother had whispered late at night when she thought Arya was asleep. She went from pack to pack, burning the sickness out of anyone she touched. The silver fire could kill the plague. But it cost her. Every life she saved took something from her, made her weaker, more fragile. "And she kept going anyway," Cale said quietly. "She kept going until there was nothing left." Arya's voice cracked. "The last pack she visited, she collapsed before she could finish healing them. The fire just went out. She died in a stranger's arms, miles from home, with nothing to show for her sacrifice except a bunch of wolves who went back to their normal lives and forgot about her." Cale's jaw tightened. "That's not true. I remember her. Or at least I remember the songs about her. The flame that walked, the mercy that burned. She's a legend in the northern territories, Arya. Children grow up hearing stories about the wolf who could burn away death itself. Children grew up hearing stories about a saint," Arya corrected bitterly. "Not a woman who was so desperate to prove she wasn't a monster that she literally killed herself trying to save people who feared her." She pulled her hand from Cale's, wrapping her arms around herself. "My mother told me once that my grandmother spent her whole life trying to make people see her power as a gift instead of a curse. And in the end, all she got for it was an early grave." "Is that what you're afraid of?" Cale asked softly. "That you'll end up like her?" "I'm afraid I already am like her," Arya admitted. "That I'll spend my whole life trying to prove I'm not dangerous, trying to control something that can't be controlled, and I'll die alone and forgotten just like she did." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and raw. Then Cale did something that shocked her. He laughed. Not mockingly, not cruelly, but with genuine, surprised amusement. "What?" Arya demanded, her face flushing with anger and embarrassment. You, Kale said, still smiling. You're sitting here terrified that you'll die alone and forgotten, and you don't even realize. He reached out and cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. Arya, you saved the Alpha King's life. You fought off trained assassins using power you barely understand. And now you're about to walk into the most dangerous political situation in the Northern Territories to help me root out traitors. His smile widened. Trust me, whatever else happens, you are not going to be forgotten. That's not comforting, Arya said. But she felt a reluctant smile tugging at her lips. It's not supposed to be comforting. It's supposed to be true. Kale's thumbs brushed across her cheekbones, and Arya's breath caught. Your grandmother sacrificed herself trying to save people who feared her. But you? You're going to save people who already know you're dangerous, who've already cast you out. And you're going to do it not because you need their approval but because it's the right thing to do. How do you know that? Arya whispered. Because you saved me, Kale said simply. A stranger bleeding out in the snow. You had no reason to help, every reason to walk away. But you knelt beside a dying wolf and poured your power into him anyway. His eyes were intense, burning into hers. That's not someone who's broken, Arya. That's someone with more courage than she knows what to do with. Arya felt something crack inside her chest. Some wall she'd built around her heart to keep the pain at bay. Because, for the first time since her exile, maybe for the first time in her entire life, someone was seeing her clearly. Not as a curse. Not as a weapon. Not as a problem to be managed. Just as her. Flawed and powerful and worth saving. I don't know how to do this, she admitted, her voice small. I don't know how to be what you need me to be. Good, Kale said, his smile turning wicked. Because I don't need you to be anything except yourself. Dangerous fire and all. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she found herself leaning into him instead, his forehead came to rest against hers. Close enough to share breath. Close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. I'm not going to let you burn out like your grandmother did, Kale murmured. I'm not going to use you up and throw you away. That's a promise, Arya. Whatever else happens between us, I will never ask you to sacrifice yourself for my kingdom. Even if it means losing? Arya asked. Even then. Kale's hand slid down to her shoulders, steadying her, anchoring her. Because some things are more important than winning. Like making sure the people who fight beside you actually survive to see the victory. Arya closed her eyes, letting herself lean into his warmth. Just for a moment. Just until the shaking in her hands stopped. She'd been alone for so long. Isolated. Cut off from everything that made wolves feel whole. And now this man, this complicated, dangerous, infuriating king was offering her something she'd been too afraid to hope for. Connection, purpose, a reason to stop hiding. Tell me about your father, Arya said quietly. You said he brought you to these caves, taught you to survive. Kale was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rougher than before. Raw. My father was a good king, fair, strong. He ruled the Northern Territories for 40 years without a single uprising. Everyone respected him, loved him even. But, Arya prompted, because she could hear the weight in his words. But he was also distant. Kale's hands fell away from her shoulders, and he turned to look out at the sunrise. He saw me as the heir first and his son second. Everything was about training, preparation, making sure I'd be strong enough to take the throne when he was gone. His jaw tightened. He never taught me how to trust people, only how to use them. How to identify threats. How to always put the kingdom before personal feelings. That sounds lonely, Arya said softly. It was. Kale's smile was bitter. I spent my entire childhood learning to see everyone as either an asset or a threat. To keep my distance. To never let anyone close enough to hurt me. He looked back at her, and something vulnerable flickered in his amber eyes. And then my father died. And I inherited a throne I was prepared for but a kingdom I didn't understand. Because he'd taught me strategy and politics and combat, but he'd never taught me how to actually connect with the people I was supposed to lead. Is that why you married Seraphine? Arya asked. Because she was an asset? Kale's expression darkened. I married her because I was young and stupid, and she was beautiful and ambitious. And I thought. He cut himself off, shaking his head. I thought I could control her. Thought I could keep her at arm's length while using her family's political connections to solidify my rule. His laugh was harsh. Turns out she was smarter than I gave her credit for. She played the long game. Wormed her way into my council, made allies. And when she realized I'd never give her real power, she decided to take it by force. By killing you. By killing me. Kale agreed. Quick, clean, and with enough plausible deniability that she could claim it was rogues or rival packs. If she'd succeeded. He trailed off, his hands clenching into fists. If she'd succeeded, she would have taken the throne, married one of her conspirators, and ruled through him. And everything my family built over generations would have been hers. Arya watched him carefully, saw the tension in his shoulders, the barely controlled rage simmering beneath his skin. But she didn't succeed. You survived. Because of you. Kale turned to face her fully, his eyes blazing. Do you understand what that means, Arya? You didn't just save my life. You derailed an entire conspiracy. A coup that's probably been years in the making. And now Seraphine knows you exist, which means I'm a target, Arya finished. I figured that part out when she ordered her assassins to kill me. It's more than that. Kale reached out and took her hand again, his grip almost desperate. You're not just a target now. You're a symbol. The wolf who saved the king. The one who stands between Seraphine and the throne, which means every enemy I have will be coming for you too. The weight of it settled over Arya like a shroud. She'd thought she understood the danger. Thought she'd accepted the risks when she agreed to help Kale. But hearing it laid out like this, understanding that she'd just painted a target on her back that would never go away, that was different. You could still run, Kale said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. I'd understand. You didn't ask for any of this. Didn't ask to be dragged into a war between people you don't even know. If you want to disappear back into the wilderness, I won't stop you. Arya looked down at their joined hands, at the silver fire that danced across their palms. Beautiful and terrible and undeniable. She thought about her grandmother. About how she'd spent her whole life trying to prove she wasn't a monster. How she'd died alone and exhausted, with nothing to show for her sacrifice except songs that no one sang anymore. She thought about her own exile. About 3 months of isolation and loneliness, and being so careful not to let her fire show, because she was terrified of what would happen if anyone saw. And she thought about last night. About fighting beside Kale, with her power fully unleashed. About how it had felt to stop hiding, to stop apologizing for existing, to let herself be dangerous and not feel ashamed of it. I'm not running, Arya said firmly. She looked up at Kale, meeting his amber eyes without flinching. You were right before. I'm tired of hiding, tired of being afraid of what I can do. And if helping you means I get to stop running, means I get to figure out what my power actually is. She squeezed his hand, feeling the silver flames pulse between them. Then I'm in. All the way. Kale stared at her for a long moment. Then his smile broke across his face like sunrise, fierce and wild and absolutely devastating. Then we'd better start planning, he said. Because Seraphine isn't going to sit idle while we prepare. She knows I'm alive now. Knows I'm coming for her. Which means she's going to move fast to consolidate her power before I can strike. What's the first step? Arya asked. We need to get back to court, Kale said, his mind already working through strategy. I've been gone for 4 days. My advisors will be panicking. And if Seraphine has allies on my council, they'll be using my absence to spread chaos, undermine confidence. Maybe even declare me dead and call for a succession vote. Can they do that? If I'm gone long enough, yes. Kale's expression hardened. Which is why we need to make a dramatic return. Show everyone I'm not only alive, but strong enough to crush anyone who thought they could take what's mine. And me? Arya asked. What do you tell them about me? Kale's smile turned sharp, calculating. We tell them the truth. That you're a healer with rare bloodline magic who saved the king's life. That you're under my personal protection. And that anyone who threatens you answers to me. That's going to cause problems, Arya said. Good. Kale stood, pulling her up with him. Let it cause problems. Let every traitor on my council panic wondering what you can do. Let Seraphine lose sleep trying to figure out how to deal with you. Because the more chaos we create, the more mistakes they'll make. He was right. It was a good strategy. But something in Arya's gut twisted with unease. Kale, she said carefully. What happens if I can't do what you need me to do? If my power doesn't work the way you think it does? If I can't identify the traitors? Kale turned back to her, his expression softening slightly. Then we figure it out together. But Arya? He reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture unexpectedly gentle. I have faith in you. Even if you don't have faith in yourself. Arya's throat tightened. Why? Because I've seen what you can do when you stop trying to control your power and just trust it. Kale's hand lingered on her cheek. Last night, when those assassins came for us, you didn't think, you didn't plan, you just reacted, and your fire knew exactly what to do. It hurt them, Arya whispered. I felt it. The way the flames touched something deep inside them. Something that made them afraid. Exactly. Kale's eyes gleamed with fierce satisfaction. Your fire doesn't just burn, Arya. It touches the soul, sees past the flesh to what's underneath, and if it can make enemies afraid. He leaned in close, his voice dropping to something intimate and dangerous. Imagine what it could do to liars. Understanding dawned cold and bright. You think my fire can sense corruption, Arya said slowly. Not just poison in the blood, but lies, betrayal, hidden intentions. I think your grandmother could, Kale said. And I think you inherited more from her than just pretty silver flames. His smile was sharp, which is why every traitor in my court is about to have a very bad day. Arya should have been terrified. Should have been overwhelmed by the responsibility he was placing on her shoulders. But instead, she felt something wild and fierce unfurl in her chest. Something that had been sleeping since her exile. Since the moment her pack had looked at her with fear and sent her away. Her power wasn't a curse. It was a weapon. One that could cut through lies and pretense and political scheming to find the truth beneath. And she was about to learn how to wield it. When do we leave? Arya asked. Kale's smile was triumphant. At nightfall. We'll travel under cover of darkness. Arrive at court by dawn. And then, his eyes glittered with something cold and dangerous. Then we see who's still loyal. And who needs to burn. Arya nodded, her silver fire already rising in response to the promise of action, of purpose. She was done hiding, done running, done apologizing for the power that lived beneath her skin. The girl who'd been exiled for her fire was about to walk into the Alpha King's court. And gods help anyone who got in her way. Chapter 4, Silver Flames and Ancient Prophecies. They found the shrine by accident. Or at least, that's what Arya told herself as she and Kale made their way through the cave system, preparing for the journey back to court. But the truth was stranger than accident. More unsettling. The silver fire had pulled her here. This passage wasn't on the map, Kale said, frowning at the narrow tunnel that had appeared where solid rock should have been. His torch cast dancing shadows on walls that seemed to shift and breathe. I've been coming to these caves since I was a child. This shouldn't exist. Maybe you missed it, Arya offered, but her voice lacked conviction. Because she could feel it now. A thrumming beneath her skin that matched the pulse of her fire. Like something deep in the earth was calling to her. Recognizing her. Welcoming her home. We should go back, Kale said, but he was already moving forward, drawn by the same inexplicable pull that had Arya's feet moving before her brain could catch up. The tunnel opened into a chamber that stole the breath from Arya's lungs. It was ancient. That was the first thing she understood. The stone walls were carved with symbols that predated any written language she knew, spirals and flames and wolves that seemed to move in the flickering torchlight. But it was the altar in the center that made her heart stop. A circle of silver stone, untouched by time or decay. And in the center, a flame, not a normal flame. This burned silver white, casting no smoke, requiring no fuel. It simply existed, eternal and patient and waiting. Gods, Kale breathed beside her. This is a moon shrine. A real one. Arya had heard stories about the moon shrines. Sacred places where the moon goddess herself had touched the earth, leaving behind fragments of her power. Places where the veil between worlds grew thin, where prophecies were born and destinies were written. But the shrines were supposed to be legend, myths told to children. Not real places hidden in cave systems that shouldn't exist. Look at the walls, Kale said, moving closer to examine the carvings. These symbols. I've seen variations in the royal archives, but never this complete. This pristine. His fingers traced a spiral that seemed to pulse with faint light. It's a prophecy. Or a history. Maybe both. Arya moved toward the altar, as if in a dream. The silver flame called to her with a voice that had no words. Only feeling. Only knowing. Arya, wait. Kale reached for her. But she was already kneeling before the altar, already reaching out to touch the flame. The moment her fingers brushed the silver fire, the world exploded into light. She saw a woman standing in a forest of burning trees, silver flames pouring from her hands like rivers. The woman's face was Arya's own, but older, fiercer, marked with scars that told stories of battles won and lost. The flame that walks will rise when darkness seeks to claim the throne. A voice whispered, ancient, feminine, vast as the sky itself. She who burns with silver light will stand between the world and night. The vision shifted. Now Arya saw wolves, hundreds of them, bowing before a figure wreathed in silver fire. But their eyes held fear as much as reverence. And behind the figure, shadows gathered. Waiting. Hungry. Two paths lie before the burning one. The voice continued. Save the kingdom and lose yourself. Or save yourself and watch the kingdom burn. Choose wisely, daughter of ash and flame. For the choice you make will echo through eternity. The vision shattered like glass, and Arya saw one final image. A crown of silver fire, beautiful and terrible, hovering above her head, waiting to be claimed, waiting to consume her. Arya gasped as she was thrown back from the altar, her body hitting the stone floor hard enough to knock the air from her lungs. Strong hands caught her before her head could crack against the ground. Arya! Kale's face swam into focus above her, his amber eyes wide with concern and something else. Something like awe. What happened? Your eyes, they were glowing, pure silver. And the flame. He gestured to the altar, and Arya's stomach dropped. The eternal flame had grown. It now blazed twice as high, and symbols were appearing in the air around it, written in fire, hanging suspended like stars. Ancient words in a language that should have been dead. But Arya could read them. She who was cast out will return crowned in silver, she whispered, translating without understanding how she knew the words. She who was called cursed will be called salvation. She who burned alone will set the world aflame. It's about you, Kale said, his voice hushed. Reverent. This prophecy. It's about you. No. Arya scrambled to her feet, backing away from the altar. No, I'm not. The flame that walks, Kale continued, his eyes fixed on the burning symbols. That's what they called your grandmother. But this prophecy is older than her. Much older. Which means it's been waiting. Arya finished, horror and understanding crashing over her in equal measure, waiting for someone from the Ashbourne line to be powerful enough, desperate enough, broken enough to fulfill it. Kale turned to her, and the look on his face made her want to run. It was the way her pack had looked at her when the silver fire first emerged. Not with fear. Exactly. But with the knowledge that she was other. Different. Something that didn't fit into the world as it was. You're not broken, Kale said firmly, crossing to her in 3 long strides. You're exactly what you're supposed to be. A weapon? Arya shot back, her voice rising. A tool for the moon goddess to use however she wants? That vision, Kale. I saw myself standing over bodies. Saw wolves bowing to me out of fear. Saw a crown that looked like it wanted to devour me. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to stop the shaking. That's not salvation. That's damnation. Or it's a warning, Kale said quietly. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he took her hands in his, grounding her. Prophecies aren't instructions, Arya. They're possibilities. Roads that could be traveled, but you still get to choose which path you take. The voice said I had 2 choices, Arya whispered. Save the kingdom and lose myself. Or save myself and watch the kingdom burn. That's not a choice, Kale. That's a trap. Then we find a third option. Kale's grip tightened on her hands. We figure out how to save the kingdom. And keep you whole. Because I refuse to believe the moon goddess would give you this power just to watch it destroy you. Arya wanted to believe him. Wanted to trust that there was a way through this that didn't end with her burned out and dead like her grandmother. But the vision had felt so real. So inevitable. What if I can't? She asked, hating how small her voice sounded. What if I'm not strong enough to carry this? What if trying to be what everyone needs me to be breaks me the way it broke her? Kale pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her in a gesture that should have felt possessive but instead felt like safety, like being anchored in a storm. Then you're not doing this alone, he murmured into her hair. Your grandmother tried to save everyone by herself, refused help, refused to let anyone share the burden. But you? He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. You have me. And I'm not going to let you sacrifice yourself for my kingdom. Not now. Not ever. You can't promise that, Arya said. Watch me. Kale's smile was fierce. Defiant. I'm the Alpha King of the Northern Territories. I've spent my entire life being told what I can and can't do, what I'm supposed to sacrifice for the good of the kingdom. And I'm done with it. Done watching good people burn themselves out for causes that don't appreciate them. He cupped her face in his hands, his amber eyes blazing with intensity. So here's what's going to happen. We're going back to court. We're going to expose every traitor who thought they could take what's mine. And we're going to do it together. Not with you as my weapon. Not with you as my sacrifice. But as partners. Equals. I'm not your equal, Arya protested. You're a king. I'm an exiled. You're the flame that walks, Kale interrupted. The fulfillment of a prophecy older than my bloodline. The wolf who saved my life when anyone else would have let me die. And if that doesn't make you my equal, I don't know what does. Arya stared at him, her mind reeling. Because he meant it. She could see it in his eyes, feel it in the way he held her. He wasn't trying to use her. Wasn't trying to mold her into something convenient. He was seeing her, really seeing her, and deciding she was worth standing beside. The prophecy said I'd have to choose, Arya said quietly. Save the kingdom. Or save myself. Then we prove the prophecy wrong, Kale said. We find a way to do both. Because if the moon goddess thinks I'm going to sit back and watch you destroy yourself for a throne I never asked for, she clearly doesn't know me very well. Despite everything, despite the fear and the uncertainty and the weight of destiny pressing down on her shoulders, Arya felt a laugh bubble up from her chest. You're insane. Probably, Kale grinned. But I'm also right. And deep down you know it. He was right. Gods help her, he was absolutely right. The prophecy had shown her two paths. But prophecies could be wrong. Could be changed. Could be defied by people stubborn enough to refuse the fate laid out for them. And Arya had spent her entire life being too stubborn for her own good. Okay, she said, decision crystallizing in her chest like ice. Okay. We do this your way. We go to court, expose the traitors, save your kingdom. But, she met his eyes, letting him see the steel beneath her fear. If it comes down to a choice between your throne and my life, you let me make that decision. Not you. Not the prophecy. Me. Kale's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Deal. As long as you promise to actually think about it instead of just throwing yourself on the nearest pyre. I promise to think about it, Arya agreed. Can't promise I'll make the decision you want. I'll take it. Kale pressed a kiss to her forehead, brief, chaste, but somehow more intimate than anything else he'd done. Now come on, we need to get back to the others, plan our entrance, and figure out how to explain to my court that I've returned from the dead with a legendary healer at my side. They turned to leave the chamber, but Arya paused at the threshold. The silver flame on the altar had shrunk back to its original size, but the symbols still hung in the air, still burned with patient, eternal light. She who burned alone will set the world aflame, Arya whispered, reading the words one last time. But this time, she noticed something she'd missed before. A final line, written so faintly she almost couldn't see it. But she need not burn alone. Arya looked at Kale, at the man who'd promised to stand beside her, even if it meant defying the gods themselves. And for the first time since the vision, She felt something other than fear. She felt hope. Dangerous, foolish, absolutely reckless hope. But hope nonetheless. "Ready?" Kale asked, holding out his hand. Arya took it, letting silver fire dance across their joined palms. "Ready." They left the moon shrine behind, but Arya knew the prophecy would follow her, would echo in her mind every time she used her power, every time she made a choice. The flame that walks had risen, and the world would never be the same. Chapter 5. The Truth Burns Brightest. They arrived at the capital at dawn, and Arya's first thought was that she'd never seen anything so beautiful or so dangerous. The stormborn fortress rose from the mountainside like it had been carved from the stone itself. Massive walls of dark granite, towers that pierced the clouds, and gates wrought from silver that gleamed in the early light. This wasn't just a castle. This was a statement, a declaration of power that had stood for centuries. And Arya was about to walk through those gates wearing borrowed clothes and carrying a secret that could tear the entire kingdom apart. "Stay close," Kale murmured as they approached. He'd shifted into his wolf form for the journey, that massive black beast that had been dying in the snow just days ago. But now he walked beside her on two legs, every inch the Alpha King. He wore his authority like armor, and the guards who'd accompanied them fell into formation around him without needing orders. But Arya could feel the tension radiating from him, could see it in the set of his shoulders, the way his hand never strayed far from his sword. He was walking into a nest of vipers, and they both knew it. The gates opened before they reached them, and a man came striding out, tall, silver-haired, with the bearing of someone who'd spent decades in positions of power. His face was carefully neutral, but Arya saw the flash of shock in his eyes when he registered Kale's presence. Shock. And something else. Something that made her silver fire stir restlessly beneath her skin. "Your Majesty," the man said, bowing precisely low enough to show respect without subservience. We feared the worst. When you didn't return from your hunt, when the search parties found no trace. I'm sure you were devastated, Counselor Thane," Kale said, his voice pleasant and absolutely lethal. "Tell me, how long did you wait before calling for a succession vote?" Thane's expression didn't change, but Arya felt the spike of fear that rolled off him. Felt the way his heartbeat accelerated, his breathing shifted. Her fire was reaching toward him without her permission, tasting the air around him, searching for lies, rot, corruption wrapped in silk words. Arya's breath caught. She could feel it. The wrongness in him. Not poison in his blood like with Kale, but something deeper. A stain on his soul that reeked of betrayal. "We waited 3 days, Your Majesty," Thane said smoothly, "as tradition dictates, but when the 4th day came with no word, no sign," he spread his hands apologetically. "The kingdom cannot be without leadership, surely you understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly." Kale's smile was all teeth. "And who exactly did the council plan to nominate as my successor?" "That hadn't been decided yet." "Eliar." The word cracked through the air like a whip. Thane went rigid, and suddenly the courtyard was silent. Guards stopped moving. Servants froze in doorways, everyone watching as their king called out his own counselor. "Your Majesty," Thane said carefully, "I don't know what you think you know, but I know that someone on my council hired assassins to hunt me down like an animal," Kale said, his voice dropping to something cold and dangerous. "I know that I was poisoned with something designed to prevent healing, designed to make sure I died slowly and alone in the wilderness. And I know—" He took a step closer to Thane, and the older man actually flinched, "that the only people who knew I'd be in those woods that day were my inner circle, my most trusted advisors." Thane's face had gone pale. "You can't possibly think I had anything to do with, can't I?" Kyle gestured to Arya, and she felt every eye in the courtyard turn to her. "This is Arya Ashbourne, healer, descendant of the flame that walks, and the wolf who saved my life when your assassins left me to rot." Murmurs rippled through the gathered crowd. Arya heard her grandmother's name whispered like a prayer. Saw recognition dawn on faces that had probably grown up hearing stories about the legendary healer. "She burned the poison from my blood," Kale continued. "Kept me alive long enough to see who came looking to finish the job. And do you know who appeared? Thane. Do you know who led a second wave of assassins straight to where I was healing?" Thane's silence was answer enough. My wife, Kale said, venom dripping from the word. Or rather my ex-wife, Seraphine, the woman you vouched for when I questioned her loyalty. The woman whose family you insisted would be valuable allies. The woman who is currently plotting to take my throne. Your Majesty. I swear I had no knowledge. Touch him, Kale said, turning to Arya. Use your fire. See if he's telling the truth. Arya's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. The moment where she either proved her power was real or exposed herself as a fraud. In front of dozens of witnesses. In front of the entire court. Kale, she whispered. I don't know if I can. Yes, you do. His amber eyes locked onto hers, steady and certain. Trust your fire, Arya. Let it show you what he's hiding. Arya took a shaking breath and stepped toward Thane. The older man held his ground, but she could smell his fear now, could feel it rolling off him in waves. This is absurd, Thane said, his voice tight. You can't seriously believe some exiled wolf with delusions of grandeur can. Arya pressed her hand against his chest. Silver fire erupted from her palm. But it didn't burn. Instead, it surged, flowing into Thane's body like liquid light, seeking out the truth buried beneath layers of carefully constructed lies. And what she found made her stomach turn. Meetings in shadows. Gold-changing hands. A woman's voice, promising power, promising position, promising everything he'd ever wanted if he just helped remove one small obstacle. One stubborn king who refused to see reason. Seraphine's voice. Seraphine's promises. Seraphine's poison. He knew. Arya gasped, jerking her hand back. He knew about the assassination. He's the one who told Seraphine where you'd be. When you'd be vulnerable. She looked at Kale, horror and fury warring in her chest. He was supposed to deliver your corpse to her. Proof of death. That was his payment for a seat on her new council. The courtyard erupted. Guards surged forward. Thane tried to run but was caught before he made it 3 steps. And through it all, Kale stood perfectly still, his expression carved from stone. Seize him, Kale said quietly. Take him to the dungeons. And send word to every counselor. We're having an emergency session. Within the hour. Your Majesty. Thane struggled against the guards holding him. Please. You have to understand, she offered me. She offered you nothing but lies. Kale cut him off. And you were stupid enough to believe them. Guards, if he speaks again, gag him. They dragged Thane away, still protesting, still trying to explain. Arya watched him go and felt sick. Because he wasn't the only one. She'd felt it when her fire had touched him. Felt the connections spreading out from him like a spider's web. There were others. More traitors embedded in Kale's court. And they were all connected to Seraphine. How many? Kale asked quietly, appearing at her side. I don't know, Arya admitted. But it's not just him. There's a network. People he reported to. People who reported to him. It's like, she struggled to find the words, like a rot that's been spreading for years, invisible until you know where to look. Kale's jaw tightened. Then we look. Systematically. Starting with the council. He turned to face her fully. And the intensity in his gaze stole her breath. Can you do this, Arya? Can you touch each of them and tell me who's loyal and who needs to burn? It was exactly what he'd asked her to do. What she'd agreed to. But standing here, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes on her back, understanding that she was about to become the most hated wolf in the kingdom. They're going to despise me, she said quietly. Your court. Your people. I'm going to be the outsider who walks in and tears their world apart. Let them, Kale said fiercely. He reached out and took her hand, right there in front of everyone. Silver fire sparked between their palms, and he didn't flinch, didn't pull away. Let them hate you. Let them fear you. Because at the end of this, when the traitors are exposed and the kingdom is safe, they'll understand that you saved them, even if they never thank you for it. Arya wanted to believe him. But she'd been hated before, been feared before. It never ended well. Still, she'd made a promise. And she'd never been good at backing down from a fight. Okay, she said. Let's do this. The council chamber was chaos. 15 advisors all talking over each other, all demanding answers. Where had the king been? Why was he making wild accusations? Who was this girl he'd brought back from the wilderness? Arya stood beside Kale's throne, trying to ignore the hostile stares, trying to center herself. The silver fire hummed beneath her skin, restless and eager, like it had been waiting for this moment, for permission to see. Enough. Kale's voice cut through the noise like a blade. You want answers? Here's your answer. Someone in this room hired assassins to kill me. Someone in this room has been conspiring with Seraphine to stage a coup. And before this session ends, I'm going to know exactly who. This is ridiculous, a woman said, sharp-featured. Expensive clothes, radiating arrogance. You disappear for 4 days, come back with some wild story about assassination attempts, and expect us to believe. Counselor Vera, Kale interrupted. Step forward. The woman went still. Excuse me? Step forward. Let Arya touch you. If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. I'm not letting some filthy exile put her hands on me. Vera spat. I don't care what bloodline she claims. I don't care what legends. Then you're guilty, Kale said simply. Because an innocent wolf wouldn't hesitate to prove their loyalty. Vera's face flushed red. How dare you? Seize her, Kale ordered. Guards moved, but Vera was faster. She shifted mid-stride, her clothes tearing as fur erupted across her skin. A gray wolf lunged for the nearest window, desperate to escape. She didn't make it. Arya's fire lashed out instinctively, wrapping around the wolf's legs like chains. Vera crashed to the floor, howling, trapped in silver flames that didn't burn but held her immobile. 2 traitors in 1 day, Kale said, his voice cold as winter. Anyone else want to run? Anyone else want to prove their guilt by refusing a simple test? The remaining counselors stared at Arya with newfound fear. At the silver fire that wrapped around the struggling wolf. At the power they dismissed as legend made manifest. One by one, Kale said. Every counselor, every advisor, every guard who has access to my private chambers. We're going to root out every traitor in this court if it takes all week. It took 3 hours. 3 hours of touching hands and feeling the truth beneath the surface. 3 hours of exposing lies and broken oaths and corruption that ran deeper than anyone had imagined. When it was done, 7 counselors sat in chains. 7 wolves who'd sold their loyalty for promises of power, and the remaining 8 looked at Arya like she was death incarnate. Get them out of my sight, Kale said, exhaustion finally showing in his voice. Put them with Thane. We'll hold trials after I've had time to think. The guards dragged the traitors away. The loyal counselors filed out quietly, casting wary glances back at Arya. And finally, it was just her and Kale alone in the massive chamber. You did it, Kale said quietly. You actually did it. Arya looked down at her hands. They were shaking. The silver fire had dimmed, but she could still feel it crackling beneath her skin. Still feel the residue of all those lies she'd touched. All that betrayal. They hate me now, she said. The ones who are loyal. I saw it in their eyes. Fear and hatred. They'll get over it. Kale moved to stand beside her. Or they won't. Either way, you saved my kingdom today, Arya. Exposed a conspiracy that would have torn us apart from the inside. At what cost? Arya whispered. She looked up at him, and for the first time since entering the fortress, let herself be vulnerable. I'm everything they feared I'd be. The dangerous outsider. The wolf with power that doesn't belong. Your court will never accept me now. My court, Kale said slowly, deliberately, will accept whoever I tell them to accept. And if they can't see that you're the reason their king is still alive. His hand came up to cup her face. Then they're not as intelligent as I thought. Arya closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. She was so tired, so drained. Using her fire like that, pushing it to seek out truth in so many wolves had taken everything she had. Come on, Kale said gently. Let me show you to your rooms. You need rest. My rooms? Arya opened her eyes. You didn't think I was going to make you sleep in the barracks with the guards, did you? Kale smiled, soft and genuine. You're under my personal protection, Arya. Which means you get a suite in the royal wing. Right next to mine. It should have been inappropriate. Should have raised eyebrows and sparked gossip. But Arya found she was too exhausted to care. She let Kale guide her through corridors of stone and silver, past tapestries that depicted battles and ceremonies from centuries past. And when he finally opened a door to reveal a room that was bigger than the entire cabin she'd lived in during exile, she nearly cried. "Rest," Kale said. "Sleep. And tomorrow, we'll figure out our next move. Together." He turned to leave, but Arya caught his hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "For believing in me, for not making me face them alone." Kale looked back at her, and something in his expression made her heart stutter. "I told you, Arya, you don't burn alone." "Not anymore." He left, closing the door softly behind him. And Arya finally let herself collapse onto the massive bed, her body aching, her mind reeling. She'd exposed 7 traitors, proven her power was real, secured her place at the Alpha King's side, but she'd also painted an even bigger target on her back, because Seraphine would have heard by now, would know that her conspirators had been discovered, that Kale had returned with a weapon she hadn't anticipated. The first clash was over, but the war had only just begun. Chapter 6, Hearts That Recognize Home. Arya didn't sleep. How could she, when every time she closed her eyes, she felt the ghosts of all those lies she'd touched? 7 counselors, each one carrying betrayal like a sickness. She'd felt it all, the greed, the ambition, the cold calculation that let them plot their king's murder without hesitation. It was in her now. Under her skin. In her blood. Like a stain she couldn't wash away. Around 3 in the morning, she gave up trying. She wrapped herself in the silk robe someone had left folded on a chair. Expensive. Soft. Nothing like the rough furs she'd worn during exile, and stepped out onto the balcony attached to her room. The view stole what little breath she had left. The fortress sat high on the mountain, overlooking forests that stretched to the horizon. In the moonlight, everything was silver and shadow, beautiful and wild. This was the kingdom she'd agreed to help save. These were the territories Kale would die protecting. And somewhere out there, Seraphine was planning her next move. Couldn't sleep either. Arya spun around, silver fire sparking instinctively at her fingertips. But it was only Kale, stepping onto his own balcony which, she now realized, was connected to hers by a narrow walkway. Close enough to reach in seconds. Close enough to hear if she called for help. Close enough that privacy was an illusion. "You put me next to you on purpose," Arya said. "Guilty." Kale leaned against the railing, and the moonlight caught in his dark hair, making him look like something carved from shadow and silver. He'd changed out of his formal clothes into simple sleeping pants and a loose shirt. Barefoot. Relaxed. But his eyes were alert, watching her with that intensity that made her feel seen straight through to her soul. "Can't protect you if you're on the other side of the fortress." "I don't need protecting," Arya protested, even though they both knew it was a lie. "No?" Kale's eyebrow arched. "So the fact that you exposed 7 traitors today, 7 wolves with families, allies, people who will want revenge doesn't concern you at all?" Arya's jaw tightened. "I did what you asked me to do." "I know." Kale's expression softened. "And I'm grateful. But that doesn't change the fact that you're now the most dangerous wolf in my court. Not because of what you can do, but because of what you know." He pushed off the railing and crossed the walkway to her balcony with easy grace. "Every wolf who has something to hide is going to be terrified of you now, Arya. Terrified of what you'll find if you touch them. And fear makes people do stupid, violent things. So, you're keeping me close," Arya said quietly. "I'm keeping you alive." Kale stopped a few feet away, giving her space but making his presence known. "There's a difference." Arya turned back to the view, wrapping her arms around herself. The night air was cold, but her silver fire kept her warm. Always warm. Like she carried summer beneath her skin, even in the depths of winter. "I can still feel them," she admitted after a long silence. "The traitors. Their lies. It's like they left pieces of themselves behind when I touched them. Rot that won't wash off." Kale moved closer. She felt him come to stand beside her, his shoulder almost brushing hers. "That's the cost of the power, isn't it? Seeing the truth means carrying the weight of it." "My grandmother must have felt this every day," Arya whispered. "Every wolf she healed, every corruption she burned away, she carried all of it. No wonder she exhausted herself. No wonder she couldn't stop, even when it was killing her. Her hands clenched on the railing. How did she stand it? How did she touch darkness over and over without letting it consume her? I don't know, Cale said honestly. But I know she had something you don't have yet. Arya looked at him. What? Experience. Cale's hand covered hers on the railing, warm and solid. She'd been using her power for decades. Had learned how to process what she felt, how to let it pass through her, instead of settling into her bones. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. You're trying to do in days what took her years to master. Of course it's overwhelming. What if I can't master it? Arya asked, voicing the fear that had been gnawing at her since the council session. What if I'm not strong enough? What if the power burns me out before I learn to control it? Cale was quiet for a moment. Then he turned to face her fully, his free hand coming up to tilt her chin until she had no choice but to meet his eyes. Then we slow down, he said simply. We take breaks. We find ways to ground you between uses. We make sure you're not carrying the weight alone. You can't protect me from my own power, Cale. No. But I can make sure you have reasons to keep fighting. His expression was intense, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before. Do you know what I saw today, Arya? When you stood in that council chamber and exposed every traitor without hesitation. Arya shook her head. I saw someone who could have run, Cale said softly. Someone who could have disappeared the moment things got dangerous. But you stayed. You faced down 15 hostile counselors, touched each one, bore the weight of their corruption, and you didn't break. His hand moved from her chin to cup her face. You didn't even bend. You just burned brighter. I was terrified the entire time, Arya admitted. I know. Cale's smile was gentle. But you did it anyway. That's what courage is, Arya. Not the absence of fear. Just the decision that something else matters more. And what matters more to me? Arya asked, her heart hammering. Cale's thumb brushed across her cheekbone. That's for you to decide. But I hope he paused, something almost hesitant crossing his features. I hope at least part of it is that you're tired of being afraid, tired of hiding, tired of letting other people define who you are and what you're worth. He was right. Gods, he was absolutely right. Arya had spent 19 years being told she was too much, too dangerous, too broken to fix. And some part of her had believed it, had internalized it so deeply that even her own fire felt like a curse she needed to apologize for. But standing here with Cale, with a king who looked at her power and saw strength instead of threat, something in her chest was starting to shift. Tell me about the fire, Cale said suddenly. Not the healing part. Not the corruption sensing part. Just the fire itself. What does it feel like? No one had ever asked her that before. It feels like, Arya struggled to find words. Like a second heartbeat. A pulse of heat that lives just beneath my skin. Most of the time it's quiet. Almost dormant. But when my emotions spike, when I'm afraid or angry or she stopped, her face heating. Or, Cale prompted, a knowing smile playing at his lips. Or, when someone touches me. Arya finished quietly. Like you are now. It responds to contact. To connection. Like it's trying to reach out and understand the person I'm touching. Show me, Cale said. Arya's breath caught. What? Show me what it feels like. Cale took her hand, pressing her palm flat against his chest, right over his heart. Let your fire touch me. Not to heal. Not to search for lies. Just touch me. Let me understand what you carry. Cale, I don't know if that's. Trust me, he said softly. The same way I'm trusting you. Arya took a shaking breath. Then, slowly, carefully, she let the silver fire rise. It poured from her palm in a gentle wave, flowing into Cale's body. Not invasive, not searching, just present, warm, like sunlight given form. And through the connection, she felt him. Not his thoughts, not his secrets, but his emotions. Raw and unfiltered. The exhaustion he hid behind authority. The fear he buried beneath confidence. The loneliness of being a king who couldn't trust anyone. The weight of responsibility that never ever lifted. and beneath it all, burning bright and fierce and undeniable, a feeling that made her heart stop. Want, need, recognition. He felt it too. This pull between them. This connection that went deeper than strategy or convenience or mutual benefit. Arya, Cale breathed, his eyes wide. I can feel you. Not just the fire. You, your fear, your determination. He trailed off, something like wonder crossing his features. Your hope. You're hoping this is real. That I'm real. That you're not going to wake up and find out it was all a dream. Arya tried to pull her hand back, suddenly vulnerable in a way that terrified her. But Cale's hand covered hers, holding it in place. Don't, he said. Don't hide from me. Not now. This is dangerous, Arya whispered. Getting close to you. Letting you get close to me. It's the only real thing in a court full of lies, Cale finished. He leaned in, close enough that she could feel his breath against her lips. I know it's dangerous. Arya, I know we should probably keep our distance, maintain professional boundaries, pretend this is just politics and strategy and nothing more. His forehead came to rest against hers. But I'm so tired of pretending. Tired of being alone in rooms full of people. Tired of wondering if anyone sees me as more than just a crown and a title. I see you, Arya said, the words pulled from somewhere deep inside her. I see you, Cale. The parts you show everyone, and the parts you hide. And she swallowed hard. I'm terrified of how much I want this. Want you. Want to believe that someone like me could have something good. Someone like you, Cale repeated, pulling back just enough to look into her eyes. Deserves everything good the world has to offer. And I intend to prove it to you. Every single day, until you believe it. He closed the distance between them slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she found herself leaning into him instead, his lips brushed against hers. Soft, gentle, nothing like the fierce, dangerous king who ruled the northern territories. This was something else. Something vulnerable and honest and absolutely terrifying in its intensity. Silver fire exploded between them, but it didn't burn. It sang, dancing across their skin, wrapping around them both, pulling them closer. Arya gasped against Cale's mouth, and he swallowed the sound, his arms coming around her waist to anchor her. The kiss deepened, and Arya felt the fire respond. Felt it recognize him on a level she didn't understand. Like their souls were speaking in a language their minds couldn't comprehend. Mine, the fire whispered. Ours. Home. Cale broke the kiss first, breathing hard, his eyes blazing amber bright. If we don't stop now, he said, his voice rough, I'm not going to be able to stop. Arya's entire body was trembling. The fire was still crackling between them, still pulling her toward him with magnetic force. Would that be so terrible? Yes. Cale's hand came up to cradle her face, his expression fierce and tender all at once. Because you deserve better than a rushed, desperate coupling on a balcony. You deserve time, attention, someone who worships you the way you should be worshipped. His thumb traced her lower lip. And when I take you to my bed, Arya, and I want you to have no doubts, no fears, no wondering if this is real or just convenience. I don't wonder. Arya whispered. You will. Cale's smile was sad. Knowing. In the morning, when the fear comes back, when you remember you're standing in the court of a king who has enemies that would kill you just to hurt him, you'll wonder if this is smart. If we're moving too fast. If you're just another weapon I'm trying to wield. He pressed a kiss to her forehead, gentle and reverent. So I'm going to give you time. Space to breathe. And when you come to me, if you come to me, it'll be because you want to. Not because you feel obligated or afraid or desperate for connection. He was right. And Arya hated it, because in this moment, with silver fire wrapping around them both, and his heart beating beneath her palm, she wanted nothing more than to let herself fall, to stop fighting, to trust that someone would catch her. But Cale was being the rational one, the careful one, the one thinking past the immediate need to something more sustainable. Okay, she said finally, stepping back. The silver fire dimmed, reluctant to release its hold. Okay. We slow down, Cale agreed. But his eyes were still burning when they looked at her. Still full of promises that made her pulse race. But Arya? Know this. What I feel for you, it's not strategy. It's not convenience. It's not me trying to secure a useful tool for my court. He caught her hand one last time, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that seared straight through to her soul. It's real, and it's not going away, no matter how much time we take. Arya nodded, not trusting her voice. Kale smiled soft and private and just for her. Then he turned and walked back across the narrow bridge to his own balcony. He paused at his door, looking back. Sleep well, Arya Ashbourne, and know that I'm right here if you need me. He disappeared into his room, leaving Arya alone with the moonlight and the racing of her heart. She touched her lips, still feeling the ghost of his kiss, still feeling the way her fire had responded to him. Mine, it whispered again. Ours. And for the first time in her life, Arya let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she was allowed to want something for herself. Something that had nothing to do with duty or destiny or saving kingdoms. Just a man who saw her clearly and chose her anyway. The dangerous, broken, too much girl who'd been cast out and told she'd never belong. Chosen. Wanted. Real. Chapter 7. When betrayal strikes at noon. The attack came at noon, when the sun was high and the court was gathered for the formal sentencing of the traitors. Arya stood beside Kale's throne, wearing clothes that had been sent to her room that morning, deep blue velvet that matched the stormborn colors, embroidered with silver thread that caught the light. Someone had braided her hair, woven silver chains through the strands. She looked like she belonged here, like she was part of the court, instead of an outsider barely tolerated. It was all a lie, and everyone knew it. The remaining counselors watched her with barely concealed hostility. The guards kept their distance, hands never far from their weapons. Even the servants gave her a wide berth, like her power might reach out and burn them if they got too close. Only Kale seemed unbothered. He sat on his throne with the absolute confidence of a man who'd survived assassination and come back stronger. And when he looked at Arya, just quick glances. Nothing obvious, there was warmth in his eyes that made her chest ache. Last night had been real. The kiss, the promises, the way her fire had recognized him. But daylight brought doubt, just like he'd predicted. Because standing here in the formal throne room, surrounded by wolves who hated her, Arya couldn't help wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake. Bring in the prisoners, Kale commanded. The 7 traitors were dragged forward in chains. Thane at the front, his expensive clothes torn and dirty. Vera snarling behind him, still more wolf than woman even in human form. And 5 others whose names Arya had learned yesterday, whose betrayals she'd felt like poison on her tongue. You stand accused of conspiracy, treason, and attempted murder of your king, Kale said, his voice carrying through the chamber with absolute authority. The evidence against you is irrefutable. Your guilt has been proven by fire that cannot lie. Do any of you wish to speak before I pass sentence? Yes. Thane stepped forward, his chains rattling. His eyes weren't on Kale. They were on Arya. I wish to speak about the witch you've brought into our court. The exile who claims to see truth but deals only in lies. Murmurs rippled through the gathered wolves. Arya felt her silver fire stir restlessly, responding to the accusation. Careful, Thane, Kale said softly, dangerously. You're already condemned. Don't make your final moments a demonstration of stupidity. Stupidity? Thane laughed, the sound bitter and broken. The only stupid thing I did was underestimate her. We all did. We thought she was just some cast-off from a minor pack. Some girl with delusions of grandeur. His lips pulled back in a snarl. But she's more than that, isn't she? She's a weapon. One you're wielding against anyone who dares question your rule. I'm wielding truth, Kale corrected. Something you wouldn't recognize if it bit you. Truth? Vera spat, her voice more growl than words. She touched us and decided we were guilty. No trial, no evidence. Just her word and your blind faith. How is that justice? Because she was right, Kale said flatly. Every single one of you was conspiring with Seraphine. Every single one of you took gold, and made promises, and plotted my death. Deny it if you can. Silence. Because they couldn't deny it. The truth was written on their faces, in the guilt they couldn't quite hide. That's what I thought, Kale said. So here's your sentence. Exile. All 7 of you. Stripped of rank, title, and territory. You have until sunset to be beyond my borders. If you're found within the northern territories after that, you will be executed on sight. Exile. Thane's laugh was ugly. You think that's mercy? You think Seraphine won't find us the moment we leave? Won't kill us to tie up loose ends? Then you should have been more careful about who you betrayed, Cale said coldly. Guards. Get them out of my sight. But before the guards could move, Thane did something that changed everything. He lunged at Arya. Not shifting. Not attacking. Just moving fast enough to grab her wrist before anyone could stop him. And the moment his skin touched hers, Arya felt it. Another presence. Not Thane. Something else. Something that had been hiding in his mind, waiting for exactly this moment. No! Thane screamed. The windows exploded inward. Wolves poured through, dozens of them, all shifting mid-leap, all wearing the white furs that marked them as Seraphine's personal guard. And in the center of the chaos, on the main balcony, stood Seraphine herself. She wore a crown of ice and silver, carried herself like she was already queen. And when she smiled at Cale, it was the smile of a woman who'd just won. Hello, husband, she purred. Did you miss me? Everything happened at once. Cale's guards engaged the attackers. Steel rang against claws. Blood sprayed across marble floors. And Arya was still trapped in Thane's grip, silver fire erupting from her skin as she tried to break free. But he held on, even as her flames burned him, even as his skin charred and blistered. She said you'd try to save him, Thane gasped, his face twisted with pain and savage satisfaction. Said you wouldn't be able to help yourself, said to use that against you. Let her go, Cale roared, trying to reach them. But Seraphine's wolves blocked his path, 3 of them engaging him at once. Even an Alpha King couldn't fight through those odds quickly. The prophecy was right about one thing. Thane continued, his voice breaking. You're going to have to choose. Save yourself or save your king. Can't do both. Not this time. Arya felt it then. The trap. The real trap. Because Seraphine's wolves weren't trying to kill Cale. They were hurting him. Pushing him toward the balcony. Toward where Seraphine waited with something in her hand that glowed sickly green. More poison. Enough to kill even an Alpha King if it hit its mark. Cale! Arya screamed. It's a trap. She's going to... Thane twisted her wrist, and agony lanced up her arm. The silver fire flickered, faltered. And in that moment of distraction, Seraphine threw. The vial arced through the air, perfect and deadly, aimed straight at Cale's heart. Arya didn't think, didn't plan, didn't consider consequences. She just moved. Her power exploded outward in a wave that sent Thane flying, that cleared a path through the fighting wolves like they were made of paper. That reached Cale half a second before the poison did. Silver fire wrapped around him like a shield, and the vial shattered against it harmlessly. The poison hissed and smoked where it hit her flames, dissolving into nothing. No! Seraphine's scream was fury incarnate. That's impossible. Nothing can burn through that poison. Nothing. But Arya's fire was. The same way it had burned through the poison in Cale's blood days ago. The same way it touched truth and burned away lies. The same way it was now burning through her own strength, taking everything she had and demanding more. Arya, stop. Cale grabbed her shoulders, his eyes wide with alarm. You're going to kill yourself. But she couldn't stop, because the moment she'd touched her fire to the poison, she'd felt something else. Something hidden beneath Seraphine's attack. A curse. Old magic, woven into the poison itself. This wasn't just meant to kill Cale. It was meant to corrupt him. Turn him into something monstrous. Something that would destroy his own kingdom from the inside. There's a curse. Arya gasped, her whole body shaking with the effort of holding the shield. She was going to. She wanted to. I wanted you to watch him suffer, Seraphine said, her beautiful face twisted with hatred. Wanted you to see what happens to kings who reject me. But you, her eyes narrowed on Arya, you're stronger than I thought, stronger than you should be, unless her expression shifted. Understanding dawned, cold and terrible. Unless the prophecy wasn't about stopping me, it was about you. About the Ashbourne girl becoming something neither of us expected. Retreat. Cale shouted to his guards. Fall back. Protect the council. His wolves obeyed, creating a defensive line between the civilians and Seraphine's attackers. But Seraphine wasn't interested in the council anymore. All her attention was fixed on Arya. "Kill the girl," she commanded. "I don't care how, just end her." Her wolves turned as one toward Arya, toward the exhausted, trembling girl who'd just spent everything she had to save her king, toward the easy target. "Over my dead body," Chaol snarled. He shifted mid-stride, his human form exploding into that massive black wolf that had been dying in the snow just days ago, now fully healed, fully powerful, fully furious. He threw himself between Arya and the attackers, and the sound that came from his throat was pure death. A challenge. A promise. Touch her and die. But there were too many. Even an alpha king couldn't fight 12 wolves at once. Arya saw it happening as if in slow motion, saw them circling, saw the net tightening, saw Chaol about to be overwhelmed. And she remembered the prophecy. Save the kingdom and lose yourself, or save yourself and watch the kingdom burn. But there had been a third line. One written so faintly she'd almost missed it. But she need not burn alone. "Chaol!" Arya screamed. "Trust me." She didn't wait for his response. She just reached for him with her power, with everything she had left. Silver fire poured from her body, but instead of forming a shield, it wrapped around Chaol like a second skin, strengthening him, amplifying his power, turning him into something more than just an alpha king, into something legend. Chaol's wolf form blazed with silver light. His eyes went from amber to white-hot, and when he moved, it was with speed and strength that shouldn't have been possible. He tore through Seraphine's wolves like they were made of shadow, each strike perfectly placed, each movement devastatingly efficient. Arya felt it through their connection, felt his battle mind sinking with her power, using her fire not to destroy but to enhance. Together, they were unstoppable. Within minutes, Seraphine's attack force lay broken, some dead, most fleeing. And Seraphine herself stood alone on the balcony, her face pale with shock and fear. "This isn't over," she spat. "You think you've won? You think one little fire witch is going to save you?" Her eyes locked on Arya, burning with pure hatred. "I know what you are now. I know what the prophecy really means. And when I come back, and I will come back, I'm going to make sure you burn so bright there's nothing left but ash." She dove off the balcony, shifting mid-fall, disappearing into the forest below. Chaol shifted back to human form, breathing hard, still glowing with traces of Arya's silver fire. He turned to her, and the look on his face was complex gratitude and wonder and something that looked like fear. "What did you do?" he asked quietly. "I don't know," Arya admitted. Her legs gave out, and Chaol caught her before she hit the ground. I couldn't let them hurt you. So You shared your power," Chaol said, awe in his voice. "Merged your fire with my strength. I've never felt anything like that. Never been that strong." "Is that bad?" Arya asked, her vision starting to blur. "I don't know," Chaol admitted. He lifted her easily, cradling her against his chest. "But we're going to find out. Together." The throne room was chaos around them. Wounded guards, frightened counselors, blood and broken glass, and the acrid smell of Arya's silver fire still lingering in the air. And in the center of it all, a king holding the girl who'd just saved his life. Again. "She's right," one of the counselors said, an older man. One of the loyal ones. "Seraphine. She'll come back. And next time she'll be prepared for." He gestured vaguely at Arya. "For whatever that was." "Let her come," Chaol said, his voice cold as winter. "Let her bring armies. Let her bring curses and poison and every trick she can think of. Because now she knows the truth." His arms tightened around Arya protectively. "She's not just fighting me anymore. She's fighting us. And we're a lot harder to kill than she thought." Arya wanted to respond, wanted to say something brave and confident, but the exhaustion was overwhelming, pulling her down into darkness. The last thing she heard before unconsciousness claimed her was Chaol's voice. Soft and fierce and absolutely certain. "I've got you. I won't let you fall. Not ever." And despite everything, despite the betrayal and the violence and the prophecy that promised only pain, Arya believed him. She wasn't burning alone anymore, even if it killed them both. Chapter 8. The Power Claimed. Arya woke to fire. Not her silver flames. Real fire. orange and red and consuming, eating through the walls of her room like a living thing. Smoke choked the air, thick and toxic. And somewhere beyond the flames, she heard screaming. She rolled out of bed, coughing, her mind still foggy from exhaustion. How long had she been unconscious? Hours, days. Her body ached like she'd been trampled, and her power felt distant. Muted. Like she'd burned through so much that there was barely anything left. Arya, Cale's voice, raw with panic, coming from the other side of a wall of flames that separated their rooms. "I'm here," she called back, stumbling toward the balcony. Away from the fire. Toward fresh air. "I'm okay. The fortress is under attack," Cale shouted. "Seraphine, she came back with an army. They've breached the walls." Arya's blood ran cold. An army. Not assassins or conspirators, but an actual army. How many wolves had Seraphine convinced to betray their king? How deep did her influence run? The balcony door was locked. Arya slammed her shoulder against it once, twice, and on the third impact it gave way. She stumbled out into chaos. The fortress was burning. Dozens of fires, all coordinated, all designed to trap the defenders inside, while attackers poured through the breaches. And in the courtyard below, Arya could see them, hundreds of wolves, all wearing Seraphine's white, all moving with military precision. This wasn't a raid. This was an invasion. "Arya!" Cale appeared on his balcony, smoke-stained and bloody but alive. "Can you cross?" She looked at the narrow walkway connecting their balconies. It was stone, untouched by flame, but below it was a 3-story drop onto unforgiving rock. "Yes," she said, because there was no other option. She crossed carefully, her bare feet finding purchase on cold stone. Cale caught her the moment she was close enough, pulling her into his room and away from the edge. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his hands already checking her for injuries. "I'm fine. What happened? How long was I?" "6 hours, Cale said grimly. "You've been unconscious for 6 hours. And in that time, Seraphine rallied every disgruntled wolf in the Northern Territories. Promised them land, titles, power, anything they wanted if they helped her take the throne." His jaw tightened. "She's calling it a liberation. Says I'm a tyrant who executes counselors without trial and keeps a witch as my personal weapon." "That's a lie," Arya said. "Of course it's a lie. But it's a lie people want to believe." Cale moved to his weapons rack, strapping on knives and a sword with practiced efficiency. "Half my territories have declared for her. The other half are still deciding. And the wolves who stayed loyal are currently fighting for their lives against overwhelming numbers." Arya looked out the window again. Saw Cale's guards forming defensive lines. Saw them being pushed back, step by bloody step. Saw the white-furred wolves advancing with the confidence of victory already assured. "We have to get you out of here," Cale said. "There's a passage in the lower levels, an escape route my father built. If we move fast—" "No," Arya said. Cale froze. "What?" "I'm not running." Arya turned to face him, and despite the smoke and fear and exhaustion, her voice was steady. "Not this time. Not from her. Arya, there are hundreds of them. Even with your power, we can't." "Yes, we can." Arya moved to him, taking his hands in hers. Silver fire sparked weakly between their palms. But it was there. Still alive. Still fighting. The prophecy said I'd have to choose. Save the kingdom, or save myself. But we found a third way, didn't we? When we fought together. When our powers merged. Understanding dawned in Cale's eyes. "You want to do that again?" "I want to do it better," Arya said. "I wasn't trying last time. Wasn't controlling it. But now I know it's possible. Know that my fire can amplify your strength. Make you into something unstoppable." She squeezed his hands. "Let me fight beside you, Cale. Let me be more than just the witch hiding behind your throne." "You'll burn yourself out," Cale said. But there was hope in his voice now. Fierce, desperate hope. "If you push your power that hard again, then I burn," Arya said simply. "But better that than watching you fall because I was too afraid to try." Cale stared at her for a long moment. Then he pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. "You're absolutely insane. I learned from the best," Arya said. He kissed her, then hard and desperate, and full of promises that might never be kept. When he pulled back, his eyes were blazing. "If we're doing this," he said, "we do it right. No holding back, no hesitation. We hit them with everything we have and we don't stop until either they're broken or we are." "Agreed," Arya said. "Then let's show them what happens when you back the flame that walks into a corner." They emerged from the fortress like vengeance incarnate. Chaol in full armor, moving with the deadly grace of a king who'd spent his entire life preparing for war. And Arya beside him, wearing nothing but the silk robe she'd woken in, silver fire already crawling across her skin in anticipation. The courtyard fell silent when they appeared. Seraphine's wolves stopped advancing. Even the defenders paused, staring at the girl who glowed like a star, and the king who walked beside her without fear. "Seraphine," Chaol's voice boomed across the battlefield. "Show yourself, or are you content to let your followers die while you hide in the shadows?" For a moment, nothing. Then laughter cold and cruel echoed from the main gates. Seraphine walked through the breach, like she owned it. Still wearing that crown of ice and silver. Still beautiful and terrible and absolutely certain of her victory. "Hello again, darling," she said. "I see you brought your pet witch. How predictable. I see you brought an army of cowards." Chaol shot back. "Tell me, how many lies did it take to convince them to betray their king?" "No lies necessary," Seraphine said. "I just told them the truth, that you're weak, that you let a curse-born exile manipulate you, that you executed loyal counselors based on the word of a girl who can barely control her own power." She smiled, sharp and vicious. They were eager to believe, eager for a leader who understands strength. "Then let me show you strength," Chaol said. He shifted, his human form exploding into that massive black wolf. But this time, he didn't attack. He just stood there, waiting for Arya. She moved to him without hesitation, placing both hands on his fur, and this time she knew what she was doing. Silver fire poured from her body in a torrent. Not wild, not uncontrolled, purposeful, directed. She felt it flow into Chaol like water finding its course, seeking out every part of him that needed strengthening. His muscles, his bones, his very essence, and she pushed. The transformation was instant and absolute. Chaol's wolf form blazed with silver light so bright it hurt to look at directly. He grew larger, his already massive frame expanding until he stood taller than any wolf had a right to be. And when he moved, the ground trembled. "Impossible," Seraphine breathed, her confidence cracking for the first time. "You wanted to see what we are?" Arya called out, her voice amplified by the fire coursing through her. "You wanted to understand what you're fighting? Look at us." She stepped forward, and silver flames erupted from the ground where she walked. Not burning, not destroying, just claiming, marking this territory as hers, as theirs. "I am Arya Ashbourne," she declared, her voice ringing across the courtyard. "Daughter of the flame that walks. Heir to power you can't comprehend. And I stand with Chaol Stormborn, Alpha King of the Northern Territories." Her eyes locked on Seraphine. "You want his throne? You want his kingdom? Then you go through us." Seraphine's face twisted with rage. "Kill them! Kill them both!" The army surged forward as one, and Chaol, enhanced by Arya's fire, amplified beyond anything natural, met them head-on. He was a force of nature. Every strike perfectly placed. Every movement devastating. He tore through Seraphine's wolves like they were made of paper, and behind him, Arya's fire burned, not touching his allies. Only his enemies. Only those who'd chosen betrayal over loyalty. The flames sought out corruption, found it, burned it away, and through their connection, Arya felt Chaol's battle mind. Felt his strategy, his awareness of every fighter on the field. She fed him information without words, warned him of attacks from behind, showed him weak points in the enemy formation, guided his strikes with preternatural precision. They weren't just fighting together. They were fighting as one. "Fall back," someone in Seraphine's army screamed. "They're monsters, they can't be." But Arya's fire was already wrapping around him, not killing, just stopping, holding him in place while her power searched his soul. Coerced, she realized. threatened into service, family held hostage. Go, she said, releasing him. Get your family and run. You're not guilty. The wolf stared at her in shock. Then he bolted, disappearing into the chaos. Arya did it again and again, touching enemies with her fire, sorting the truly guilty from those who'd been forced or manipulated, letting the innocent flee while Kale dealt with those who'd chosen darkness willingly. Within an hour, Seraphine's army was broken, half dead, half fled, the rest on their knees surrendering to a king and his flame who'd proven themselves utterly, terrifyingly unstoppable. Only Seraphine remained standing, alone now, abandoned by the wolves who'd promised to follow her. You can't kill me, she said, her voice shaking but defiant. I'm still technically your wife, still protected by marriage law. Kill me and the other territories will call it murder. We'll use it as justification to— I don't need to kill you, Kale said. He shifted back to human form, still glowing with traces of silver fire. Arya moved forward, her power still crackling across her skin. She was exhausted, shaking. But there was enough left for this. One final act. She pressed her hand to Seraphine's chest, and she looked deep into the woman's soul, past the beauty and the ambition and the cold calculation, all the way down to the core of who Seraphine really was. What she found made her sick. She killed them, Arya whispered. The plague 30 years ago, the one that my grandmother died fighting. It wasn't natural. It was her family. They created it, released it, killed hundreds of wolves just to prove they could, just to see if they could weaponize disease. Kale's expression went cold as ice. What? My grandmother died stopping a plague that Seraphine's family created for profit, Arya said, silver flames rising higher. She tried to save your grandmother too, didn't she? That's why you remembered the stories. Why you knew her name. Because she came here. Tried to heal the Stormborn pack. Tried to. She was too late, Kale finished, his voice hollow. My grandmother died despite her efforts. The Ashborn healer blamed herself, pushed harder, went to more packs, until there was nothing left, Arya said. She died saving people from a plague that never should have existed. That was created by the family you married into. Seraphine tried to back away, but Arya's fire held her in place. You can't prove that. Those records are long destroyed. No one will believe. I believe her, Kale said. And that's all that matters. He turned to his guards. Take her. Lock her in the deepest cell we have. And send messengers to every territory. Tell them we have evidence of crimes that go back 30 years. Crimes that demand justice. You can't! Seraphine screamed as the guards dragged her away. You need me. My family's connections. Their wealth. Without us you're nothing. Nothing. But her voice faded as she was pulled into the fortress, leaving Kale and Arya standing alone in a courtyard littered with the wounded and the dead. It's over, Arya said quietly. She's finished. This battle is over, Kale corrected. But the war? He looked at the destruction around them. That's just beginning. She has allies, family, people who won't accept her imprisonment without retaliation. Then we fight them too, Arya said. She swayed on her feet, and Kale caught her immediately. Together. Like we did today. Her vision blurred. The silver fire flickered and died. And Arya felt herself falling into darkness for the second time in 24 hours. But this time, she wasn't afraid, because Kale was there. Solid and real and absolutely certain. I've got you, he murmured, lifting her into his arms. You magnificent, terrifying, absolutely perfect woman. I've got you. The last thing Arya registered before unconsciousness claimed her was the sound of his guards cheering. Of his people, her people now acknowledging what they'd done. What they'd become. Not just a king and his weapon, but partners. Equals. Two halves of something that could change the world. The flame that walks had claimed her power. And the kingdom would never be the same. Chapter 9. Choosing each other. Arya woke slowly this time. No fire, no screaming, just warmth and the soft morning light filtering through curtains she didn't recognize. She was in a bed that wasn't hers, larger, more luxurious. And when she turned her head, She found Kale sitting in a chair beside her, his head tilted back against the wall, fast asleep. He looked exhausted. His formal clothes were gone, replaced by simple sleeping pants and a loose shirt. There was dried blood on his knuckles, bruises darkening along his jaw. But he was alive, whole, and he'd stayed with her. Arya sat up carefully, testing her strength. Her body ached, but it was manageable. Distant, like the worst of the pain had passed while she slept. How long had it been this time? 2 days. She jumped, her heart hammering. Kale's eyes had opened, watching her with that intensity that made her feel simultaneously exposed and safe. 2 days? Arya repeated. You pushed yourself harder than last time, Kale said, his voice rough with sleep and something else. Something that sounded like fear. The healers said you'd burned through nearly everything. That if you'd held the connection any longer. He stopped, his jaw tightening. You could have died, Arya. Actually died. But I didn't, she said softly. Because I broke the connection when I felt you fading. Kale stood, moving to sit on the edge of the bed. Close enough to touch but not quite touching. Because I refused to let you sacrifice yourself for my kingdom. Like I promised. Arya looked at him, really looked. Saw the dark circles under his eyes. The tension in his shoulders. The way his hands were clenched like he was fighting the urge to reach for her. You haven't slept, she said. How could I? Kale's laugh was bitter. You were unconscious for 2 days, Arya. 2 days where I didn't know if you'd wake up. If I'd broken you by asking you to share your power. If, his voice cracked. If I'd killed you by being too selfish to let you run when you had the chance. Kale, I watched my father's advisor die when I was 12, he continued, the words spilling out like he'd been holding them back too long. Watched him burn himself out defending my father from assassins. He used every drop of his power, and when it was over, there was nothing left. Just ash and the memory of a man who'd loved his king too much to say no. He finally looked at her, and his eyes were haunted. I swore I'd never do that to anyone. Never ask someone to give more than they could afford to lose. And then I met you. And he swallowed hard. I asked you to do exactly that. Twice. And both times you nearly died. Arya reached out and took his hand. Silver fire sparked weakly between their palms, but it was there, still alive, still connecting them. I chose this, she said firmly. You didn't force me, Kale. You gave me options. Gave me time. And I chose to fight. Chose to stand beside you. Not because I felt obligated or manipulated or afraid, but because... She took a breath. Because you saw me when no one else would. Because you made me believe I was worth more than the curse everyone said I carried. You are worth more, Kale said fiercely. You're worth everything. Which is why I can't... He stopped, struggling with something. I can't ask you to do that again. Can't ask you to merge your power with mine if it means losing you. Then don't ask, Arya said. Let me offer. When I'm ready. When I've learned to control it better. When I can do it without burning out. She squeezed his hand. We're still figuring this out, Kale. Both of us. What we can do. What it costs. How to balance power with preservation. And if you can't, Kale asked quietly, if every time we fight together, it risks your life, then we find another way. Arya said. We adapt. We grow. We learn. She smiled, soft and certain. That's what partners do, isn't it? Figure things out together? Kale stared at her for a long moment. Then he did something that surprised her. He laughed. Real and genuine and full of relief. Partners, he repeated. Not king and subject, not master and weapon. Just partners. Just partners, Arya agreed. He pulled her close then, wrapping his arms around her carefully. Like she was precious. Fragile. Worth protecting. You terrify me, he murmured into her hair. The way you throw yourself into danger. The way you don't hesitate to give everything you have. It's brave and stupid. And absolutely maddening. I learned from the best. Arya said again, her face pressed against his chest. She could hear his heartbeat. Strong. Steady. Real. We need to talk about what happens next, Kale said after a long moment. About the court. The territories. The fact that half the northern packs watched you and I become something that shouldn't be possible. Are they afraid? Arya asked. Terrified, Kale admitted. But also in awe. You sorted the guilty from the innocent. Arya, let the coerced go free. Showed mercy where Seraphine showed none. People are already calling you the Mercy Flame, the Silver Judge. I'm not a judge, Arya protested. No. You're something better. Kale pulled back just enough to look at her. You're proof that power doesn't have to corrupt, that fire doesn't have to destroy, that someone who was cast out and told she was too dangerous can become exactly what the kingdom needs. And what does the kingdom need? Arya asked. You, Kale said simply. Not as my weapon, not as my tool, but as my equal, my partner. The wolf who stands beside the throne and makes sure I never become the tyrant. Seraphine claimed I was. Arya's breath caught. You want me to stay? Permanently. I want more than that. Kale's hand came up to cup her face. I want you to let the court recognize what you are, not just a healer, not just the Ashborn heir, but my chosen mate, my equal in all things. The wolf I trust to tell me when I'm wrong and stand with me when I'm right. Kale, I'm still exiled, Arya said. My pack cast me out. I have no status, no legitimacy. Your court will never. Your pack was wrong, Kale interrupted. And I'm the Alpha King of the Northern Territories. If I say you have legitimacy, you have it. If I say you belong at my side, you belong there. His eyes blazed with intensity. But I'm not commanding you, Arya. I'm asking. Will you stay? Will you let me stand with you the way you've stood with me? Arya's mind reeled. This was everything she'd been too afraid to hope for. Not just acceptance, not just tolerance, but belonging. A place where her power was celebrated instead of feared, where she was chosen instead of rejected. What about the prophecy? She asked quietly. It said I'd have to choose. Save the kingdom or save myself. We defied it twice, but nothing, Kale said firmly. We've already proven prophecies can be wrong. That there are more than two paths. And if the moon goddess has a problem with the choices we're making, she can tell us herself. Despite everything, Arya laughed. You're going to pick a fight with the moon goddess? If she tries to take you from me? Kale's smile was sharp. Dangerous. Absolutely sincere. Without hesitation. Arya looked at him, this complicated, fierce, infuriating king who'd somehow become her anchor, her home. The first person in her entire life who'd looked at her fire and seen beauty instead of curse. Okay, she said. I'll stay. I'll be your partner. Your equal. Whatever that means. It means everything, Kale said. And he kissed her. Not desperate this time. Not rushed or afraid. Just real. Solid. Full of promises they'd actually have time to keep. Silver fire sparked between them. But it was gentle. Warm. Not demanding or consuming. Just present. Acknowledging what they'd become together. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Kale rested his forehead against hers. The council wants to hold a formal ceremony, he said. Recognize you officially, give you a title. Make it clear you're under the throne's protection. What kind of title? Arya asked warily. That's up to you. Kale's smile was soft. But I was thinking. Flamekeeper. The wolf who guards the throne not with claws or fangs but with truth. With fire that burns away corruption and leaves only what's real. Flamekeeper. Arya repeated, tasting the words. They felt right. Powerful but not violent. Important but not threatening. I like it. Good, because they're waiting for us. Kale stood, offering her his hand. The loyalists. The wolves who fought beside us. They want to see you. Want to thank the woman who saved their king and their kingdom. Arya took his hand, letting him pull her to her feet. Her body protested the movement, still recovering, but she could stand, could walk, could face the court that had feared her just days ago. How do I look? She asked, suddenly self-conscious. She was still wearing the sleeping clothes someone had dressed her in. Her hair was a disaster. She probably looked like death itself. Like someone who fought an army and won, Kale said. like someone who's earned the right to stand wherever she wants and dare anyone to question it. He squeezed her hand. Like my equal, the ceremony was simple. No grand speeches. No elaborate rituals. Just Kale, standing before his court, with Arya beside him. And one by one, the counselors and guards and servants who'd fought with them, came forward, bowed, acknowledged what she'd done. The Flamekeeper, they called her. The Mercy Flame. The Silver Judge. Arya felt tears burning behind her eyes. Because these were wolves who'd feared her, who'd looked at her with suspicion and hostility. And now they were thanking her. You saved my son, an older woman said, kneeling before Arya, touched him with your fire, and told him to run, told him he wasn't guilty, he's alive because of your mercy. You exposed the corruption that would have destroyed us, a guard added, made us see the truth we'd been too blind to find ourselves. You stood beside our king when anyone else would have run, another said. Proved that strength isn't about power, it's about choice, and on, until Arya understood that she wasn't just accepted here. She was valued, not despite her power, but because of how she used it, with mercy, with truth, with courage to see beyond the surface to what was real. The Flamekeeper has my loyalty, Kale said when the last wolf had spoken. My trust, my protection, and anyone who threatens her answers to me personally. His eyes swept the room, daring anyone to object. She stands as my equal in all matters of the court. Her word carries the weight of the throne, and her judgment is law. Silence. Then slowly the room erupted in howls. Not of fear, of acceptance, of recognition. Arya Ashbourne, the exile, the cast-off, the curse-born girl no pack wanted, had found her place. At the side of a king who saw her clearly and chose her anyway. Thank you, she whispered to Kale. For what? He asked. For seeing me, Arya said. For not making me choose between power and belonging. For proving that I can have both. Kale smiled, warm and genuine, and absolutely devastating. You never had to choose, Arya. You just had to find someone brave enough to stand in your fire and not flinch. And you're that someone? Every day for the rest of our lives, Kale promised. If you'll have me. Arya looked around the throne room, at the wolves who'd accepted her, the kingdom she'd helped save, the future she'd been too afraid to hope for. And she saw finally what her grandmother must have known all along. Power wasn't a curse. Fear was. And the moment you stopped being afraid of what you could do and started focusing on what you should do, everything changed. I'll have you, Arya said. Today, tomorrow, for as long as this lasts. Forever then, Kale said. Because I'm not letting you go, not ever. And standing there, surrounded by wolves who'd once feared her and now celebrated her, Arya finally understood what it meant to be home. Not a place, not a pack, but a person who saw you completely and chose you anyway. The girl who'd burned alone had found someone to burn with, and together, they were unstoppable. Chapter 10. Where Belonging Lives. 3 months later, Arya stood in the same place where she'd first found Kale dying in the snow. The forest had changed. Spring had come early this year, melting the ice and coaxing green shoots from the frozen ground. Wildflowers bloomed in patches of sunlight, purple and gold and silver white. The trees no longer looked hostile. They looked peaceful, like the land itself had exhaled after holding its breath for too long. Are you sure about this? Kale asked beside her. He wore simple traveling clothes, no crown, no formal armor, just a man walking through the woods with the woman who'd changed his world. I'm sure, Arya said. She knelt in the clearing, placing her hand flat against the earth where Kale's blood had stained the snow months ago, where her silver fire had first poured into him, where everything had changed. Silver flames spread from her palm, but they didn't burn. They blessed, sinking into the soil, feeding the roots beneath, leaving a mark that would last generations. What are you doing? Kale asked softly. Leaving a memorial, Arya said, for the wolf I was when I found you here. The girl who was so afraid of her own power that she almost let you die. The exile who thought she'd never belong anywhere. She looked up at him, and her smile was bittersweet. She deserves to be remembered, even if I'm not her anymore. Kale crouched beside her, his hand covering hers. You're still her, just more. Stronger. Braver. But still the same woman who chose mercy over safety. Maybe. Arya allowed. She stood, brushing dirt from her hands, and looked around the clearing. But I'm not afraid anymore. Not of my fire. Not of what people think. Not of being too much or not enough. She turned to face him fully. You did that. You and everyone who stood with us. You taught me that power is only as dangerous as the person wielding it. You taught yourself that, Kale corrected. I just gave you space to figure it out. They stood there for a moment, holding hands in the clearing where their story had begun. Then Kale pulled something from his pocket, a small wooden box, worn and ancient. I found this in the royal archives, he said, opening it carefully. Inside was a ring. Silver. Etched with flames that seemed to dance in the light. It belonged to a healer who served the Stormborn line 300 years ago. A wolf with fire in her veins who could burn away sickness and corruption. His eyes met Arya's. Sound familiar? Arya's breath caught. My bloodline served your family before. For generations, Kale confirmed. Until a king 2 centuries ago betrayed his flamekeeper. Used her power until there was nothing left. She died, and her family swore never to serve the Stormborn line again. His expression was solemn. We wrote it off as legend. Myth. But I think it was real. I think your grandmother was trying to restore that bond, trying to prove her family could be trusted again. And she died for it, Arya whispered. She died for a plague created by the same family I married into, Kale said, his voice heavy with old guilt. She died trying to save my grandmother from poison that never should have existed. And when she failed, when she pushed too hard and burned out, her family went back into hiding, back to being exiles and outcasts and forgotten legends. He took the ring from the box and held it up to the light. But you came back. You found me. And you didn't just restore the bond, Arya. You transformed it. Made it something better than it was, something equal. He went down on one knee, and Arya's heart stopped. I'm not asking you to serve the throne, Kale said quietly. I'm not asking you to sacrifice yourself, or carry burdens alone, or be anything other than who you are. But I am asking you to stay, to build something new with me, to be my partner in every sense of the word. He held out the ring. Will you, Arya Ashbourne, Flamekeeper of the Northern Territories, accept this bond? Not as my subject but as my equal, my mate, my choice? Arya stared at the ring, at the man kneeling before her with absolute sincerity in his eyes, at the future he was offering, not perfect, but real, not easy, but worth fighting for. Yes, she said, her voice breaking. Yes, I'll stay. Yes, I'll build this with you. Yes to all of it. Kale slipped the ring onto her finger, and silver fire erupted from both of them. Not violent, not consuming, just celebrating, dancing around them like living light, wrapping them together in warmth that felt like coming home. I love you, Kale said, standing and pulling her close. Your fire, your courage, your stubborn refusal to give up even when you should. All of it. I love you too, Arya admitted. Even when you're being impossible. Even when you're making decisions that terrify me. Even when... He kissed her. And the words dissolved into something wordless and perfect. Into a promise that needed no translation. When they finally pulled apart, both glowing with traces of silver fire, Kale smiled, ready to go home. Home, Arya repeated, tasting the word. It still felt strange, foreign, but also right. Yes, let's go home. The fortress had changed too. In 3 months, they'd rebuilt what Seraphine's attack had destroyed, but they'd also made improvements. The dungeons now had proper ventilation. The servants' quarters were heated. The training grounds included spaces for wolves who couldn't shift, who needed different kinds of strength. Changes Arya had suggested. Changes Kale had implemented without question. The Flamekeeper returns. A guard called out as they approached the gates. Make way. But Arya didn't need them to make way. The wolves parted naturally, bowing as she passed. Not out of fear, out of respect. She'd spent the last 3 months proving herself, teaching young wolves how to control their power, healing those injured in the attack, using her fire to identify corruption in trade agreements and political alliances, making herself indispensable not through force, but through truth. And slowly, the court had stopped fearing her, started trusting her, started seeing what Kale had seen from the beginning, that she was exactly what they needed. Lady Arya. A young wolf ran up to her, no more than 13, with shy eyes and nervous energy. I've been practicing like you taught me. Watch. The girl closed her eyes, and small blue flames sparked at her fingertips. Controlled, purposeful, beautiful. That's wonderful, Lyra, Arya said warmly. You've got excellent control now. Your family must be proud. They are. Lyra's face lit up. My mother said she's sorry she was afraid of me before. She said having fire is a gift, not a curse, just like you proved. The girl ran off, and Arya felt tears prick her eyes. You're changing the world, Kale said softly. One wolf at a time. I'm just showing them what's possible, Arya said. Showing them they don't have to hide what makes them different. That's revolutionary, Kale pointed out. In the best way. They climbed the steps to the throne room, and Arya paused at the entrance. 3 months ago, she'd stood here trembling, afraid, certain she didn't belong. Now, she walked in with her head high. The council was in session, 8 loyal wolves who'd survived Seraphine's purge, plus new appointments Arya and Kale had vetted together. They looked up when she entered, and every face held welcome. Flamekeeper, the eldest counselor said, bowing. The king told us you were visiting the northern woods. Did you find what you were looking for? I found closure, Arya said, and something more. She held up her hand, showing the ring that glinted silver in the light. The room erupted in celebration. Howls and cheers and genuine joy that Arya still couldn't quite believe was real. When's the ceremony? Someone called out. Soon, Kale said, his arm around Arya's waist. But we wanted to tell the council first. You've all earned the right to know before the rest of the territories. The territories are going to lose their minds, a younger counselor said, grinning. Half of them are still calling your partnership unnatural, dangerous. And now you're making it official? Let them talk, Arya said calmly. We've proven ourselves already. And if some wolves can't accept that power and love can coexist. She shrugged. That's their limitation, not ours. Kale looked at her with something like awe. 3 months ago, you would have apologized for that statement. 3 months ago, I still thought I needed permission to exist, Arya said. But I've learned better, thanks to you. Thanks to all of you. She looked around the council room, at the wolves who'd become her allies, her friends, her pack. You taught me that belonging isn't something you earn by being perfect. It's something you build by being honest. Wise words from our Flamekeeper, the eldest counselor said. The kingdom is lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have the kingdom, Arya corrected. All of you. This chance to be more than the curse my first pack called me. That night, Arya stood on her balcony watching the stars, the same balcony where she'd kissed Kale for the first time, where she'd felt her fire recognize him as something essential. Can't sleep? Kale asked, appearing beside her. Just thinking, Arya said. She held up her hand, letting silver fire dance across her fingers. About my grandmother. About what she would think if she could see me now. She'd be proud, Kale said without hesitation. Would she? Arya asked. She spent her whole life trying to prove her fire was a gift. Died trying to save wolves who feared her. And I'm here, using that same fire to build something she never got to see. Which is exactly why she'd be proud, Kale said. You're not repeating her mistakes, Arya. You're learning from them. You're using your power, yes. But you're also setting boundaries. Taking breaks. Letting others help carry the weight. He pulled her close. You're living the life she wanted, but never claimed for herself. I hope so, Arya whispered. I hope wherever she is she knows. Knows that the Ashbourne line came back. That we're not hiding anymore. That we found a way to be powerful and happy at the same time. She knows, Kale said. I'm sure of it. They stood there together, wrapped in silver fire and starlight. And Arya let herself feel it. All of it. The joy. The peace. The absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. She'd been cast out for being too much, too dangerous, too broken to fix. And she'd found a king who looked at her fire and saw beauty, who stood beside her and refused to let her burn alone, who proved that love didn't tame you, it reminded you who you'd always been. I was afraid to be seen, Arya said quietly. My whole life, I was terrified that if people really saw me, all of me, they'd reject me. And they did. My pack, my family, everyone I thought would love me unconditionally. But not everyone, Kale pointed out. No, Arya agreed, turning in his arms to face him. Not you. You saw me at my most dangerous, most powerful, most uncontrolled. And you didn't flinch, didn't try to contain me or diminish me or make me smaller. You just stood there and let me burn. Because you were always meant to burn, Kale said. Just not alone. Not anymore. Arya kissed him then, pouring everything she felt into it. Gratitude, love, hope, promise. And when they pulled apart, both glowing with silver fire, she finally understood the lesson the prophecy had tried to teach. She didn't have to choose between power and belonging, between saving others and saving herself, between burning bright and finding love. She could have all of it. Be all of it. Because the things people told her to hide were the things that made her essential. The fire they called curse was the gift the world needed, and the parts of herself she'd tried to suppress were exactly what made her whole. For the first time in my life, Arya said, I'm not running toward something or away from something. I'm just here. And it's enough. You've always been enough, Kale said. You just needed to believe it. And standing there, in the kingdom she'd helped save, with the man who'd helped her save herself, Arya finally did. Thank you for walking this journey with Arya. For believing she deserved love even when she couldn't believe it herself. For staying with her through the storms and the fire, and the moments when everything seemed impossible. Maybe you felt like her, too much of one thing, not enough of another. Split between worlds, belonging nowhere. Rejected for the very things that made you unique. But here's what Arya's story teaches us. The things we're told to hide are often the things we're meant to share. The power that scares us is usually the power the world needs. And love doesn't require us to be smaller, it asks us to be brave enough to burn at full brightness. If this story moved you, leave a comment and tell me, what moment resonated most with you? If you could have one power like Arya's fire, what would it be? Or simply, did you believe Arya deserved her happy ending? I read every comment. Your thoughts matter. Your stories matter. And if you want more tales like this, stories of outcasts who become legends, of monsters who turn out to be heroes, of love that sees past the surface to the soul, subscribe to this channel. Hit that notification bell. Because here, we tell stories about the ones who don't fit, the ones who were told they're too much or not enough, the ones who learn that being different isn't a curse, it's a calling. Until the next story finds us. Remember, you don't have to be perfect to be worthy of love. You just have to be brave enough to let yourself be seen. This is what it means to be found. With love. Until we meet again, in the next tale.